So we do have concurrent sessions on Monday and Tuesday in particular, and on Wednesday we have a PDS4 training event this afternoon. It's very popular. We have PDS and numerous PDS. And the geologic mappers will be meeting separately in one of these rooms to my side. I think it's this one, the closest one here.
Yeah, very much.
The PDS4 training, and on Thursday we have been mapping this planetary spatial data infrastructure team, or MAPSIT discussions. And if you were at LPSC, you may remember we also had a similar discussion there, except this one is longer. Thursday also we have a Q&A from the PDS4 training. So if you have residual questions or are having trouble installing software, contact one of the PDS presenters. Running, we're going to show you this, is a hackathon and basically technical discussions and demonstrations. Trent is the primary leader of those efforts. So in orange here are many of those presentations in the Agassiz room. Presentations, discussions, some less formal. Mappers are in green in the PDS4 training and so on. All discussions mean we need to keep things going. And in all the rooms and closely according to the schedule. Us think. Trying very hard to keep us on schedule. Talks are different in the two rooms. The primary issue time as speakers will have time, and also, of course, the session chair will be helping with that, using a timer, and we'll give you a 2-minute warning. You may have seen the email already going around about a special in, I think it's a joint JGR and special these issues. We are making names and titles at this point. I think we have 7 or 8 or 9. And this is the presentation from the picture from 2015. Does anyone have any questions before I step aside? I'd like to introduce our first session chairs, and that's Ray Arvidsson. And then GBS.
Morning, folks. So Chris and I are your co-chairs for this morning session that actually extends into this afternoon. Some group papers, and we have to keep on time. If we don't, we'll be here till like midnight for tomorrow's session. It's a subspecies of the human race actually interested in digging into data. So we should have a good time over the next 4 days, and I hope there are lots of questions. And to that end, Chris and I will keep talks to 12 minutes, so we have for discussion for questions. And the people who want to ask questions, we should come to the microphones. Also have Chris is a wrestler. So if we don't get done in 12 minutes, and certainly 15 minutes, I will send him to go get each speak on time. Folks, this is a lavalier microphone. What to do is to put this on your bodies before you get here. So, right?
Yeah.
What you do is clip this to your, nobody has a tie, but if you had a tie, you put it on your tie. So whatever you have up here, clip it onto. There's an on button and an off button, and then put it somewhere so it doesn't drop on the floor. Get it off into your presentation. Yes, we did everything so it wasn't presentation. And we're going to talk about planetary mapping. So I'm not going to put these on bodies, so you guys can do it.
Is it on? It should be. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I have a reputation that you don't even have to have a microphone. Everybody, and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dave Williams. I'm a member of the MAPSIT Steering Committee, and I am the Planetary Geologic Mapping Community Representative on that committee. And I am here to give you a sort of an introduction about the other component that's going on here at this meeting, the annual Planetary Geologic Mappers meeting, and tell you a little bit about it. So, since this particular set of presentations are going to be archived and people will have the opportunity to download them and go through them in detail, I'm not going to go through all of the various slides and information I have on here, but I'm going to highlight a couple of major points: geologic mapping, why it's important, why we choose to do it, a bit about the history, how MAPSIT is sort of overseeing that program now, how we have an overview of the nations that will be running concurrently with what you guys are going to be doing in this room. So, geologic mapping, it is part of the scientific investigative process. When geologic maps are creating a tool, it's a tool to help us understand the evolution of a region on a planetary surface. Geologic mapping, beginning from terrestrial geology, with this paraphrase quote from Charles Darwin, by one of our late colleagues, John Guest. This in context, he said a geological map is to a geologist the way a graph is to a one, to understand the many disparate observations and images of a planetary surface, so we can really understand what the history of the surface has been. Geologic maps have been part of NASA's planetary science programs. We astronauts to the program. We needed to make geological maps of the surface of the moon using Earth-based telescopic observations as well as the lunar, to actually help plan out where we wanted to send the astronauts, because we wanted to send them to the locations where we could get samples that could help correlate ages that have been identified from the map. Probably the most map that's ever been made, the Willems and Macaulay 71 side of the moon. And so, as this lower bullet to help guide the selection of a sample collection, to get radio data to confirm the geologic ages that are determined from stratigraphic studies during the mapping process. And with our exploration of the moon, we've been able to extend geologic mapping to almost every other body in the solar system, reasonable images of the surface. See the wide variety of objects there. So, inner planets to the moons of the outer planets, and now moving on to the small bodies, asteroids, and dwarf planets. And it is worth keeping in mind here this point from the Mars exploration program, that geologic mapping is one of their most important points for understanding the geology of Mars. Of course, as I've indicated here, when you do crater count to get model age dates of parts of planetary surfaces, the units that you're going to want to count are geologic map units, homogeneous units that were produced by a consistent set of geologic process or processing you need geologic mapping to determine. It's absolutely necessary if you're going to send humans down to the landing site, or robots for that matter, whether it's rovers or something else, characteristics of the landing site. So the advantage of geologic mapping is it takes it a step beyond just typical photogeologic analysis, where you get images and you look at them and, oh, well, there's craters and there's tectonic fractures and there's volcanoes and things. You can see and identify things with that, but you need geologic mapping to determine the stratigraphic order in which these various objects were in place. You identify the features that are consistent with specific geologic processes, volcanism, tectonism, impact cratering, erosion, and deposition, which we can group in the term gradation. And characterize map units based on the attributes, the physical attributes we see in the images, to determine contact with each other, what their stratigraphy is. And this is a very, very important process if you really want to understand the geology of the planetary bodies. Indicated in the 1960s, a test of the moon prior to the moon. And then as the decades have gone on, we continued our exploration throughout the solar system of all the bodies, from the moon and Mercury in the 60s and 70s, and early Mars map, the 80s and 90s, very extensively with Mars, the Viking program. Map the surface into the satellite, Galileo Mars landing site. Most recent, thanks to Cassini satellite mission tested in the Dwarf Planet series. There's even been geologic maps, thanks to Rosetta mission, Messenger, our first global data set of Mercury. We're in the process of making geological maps of Pluto and Charon, thanks to the New Horizons mission. So the way we do this, geologic mapping, it is part of planetary cartography, which is now overseen by MAPSIP, the Mapping and Planetary Spatial Infrastructure team. And on Thursday, we will have our town hall meeting where we talk more about the whole process of data infrastructure, which all of you have roles in, and its importance because we need to have a guideline for how we deal with planetary data, how we can preserve it, how we can utilize it to be most effective for the members of our community for scientific research. What products do we need? What types of mosaics? What kind of digital terrain models and maps we need? So it all sort of and go throughout the and just showing that everybody of committee. So if you see someone on the list who's walking the hall, please feel free to ask us about what our roles are and what you can do to help us. I just want to make a short note about funding. NASA funds planetary geologic mapping through specific funding programs. The data now you can see on the slide there for whatever planetary body, there's usually a DAP that covers it. Do comparative geologic mapping of multiple planetary funded from solar systems workings. You had scientific research on a planetary body, you understand the science, but you have not made a geological map, but want to make a tool that will help support the community, then you can propose to make a map to the program PDW, Planetary Data Archival Tool. So I'm not going to go through a lot of detail about how sausage is made, geologic mapping, data sets, what you want to accomplish, what do you want to understand about a given part of a planet. It could be a global data set, it could be a feature data set like Olympus. You select your base map images, which is usually some sort of a grayscale mosaic. If you have color, that's fine. If you have a topographic data set, etc. You basically define and characterize your map units based on the physical attributes you see in the images. That includes texture, albedo, morphology, slope. The various units will contact each other to help you build your geologic map. Structural features, impact crater rings, etc. You determine the stratigraphic history from the contact relations. It has craters on it. You can use crater counting to get model dates of the surface. If it's something that has really good topographic data, you can construct across the surface. And these are all different components that we do. And the important thing is now, in this digital era, that all planetary geologic mapping that's funded by NASA is done using GIS software. Information systems software is a very powerful tool. It's been used in terrestrial geography and geology for years, but now we are required to use that for all planetary mapping. This slide just goes into more of the additional guidelines, and the USGS has a great role in helping individual mappers with the development of their proposals, the information you need, and the actual technical expertise to help guide you in using the GIS software to make planetary geologic maps. And then, just like any other scientific document or product there, it undergoes peer review, goes through a specific set of evaluations for its technical specifications to be published through the U.S. Geological Survey. And this is a process that we're continuing to refine to minimize the amount of time required to go from start to finish in the production. So let me conclude by just saying here at this meeting, we'll be in Fremont room. We're going on doing presentations for the next 2 days. This morning we'll be doing oral presentations, discussing maps, geologic maps of Mercury, Venus, and starting on Mars. Mars map oral presentations this afternoon. We're going to have our first community discussion to discuss issues relevant to the mapping community. We'll be doing the map poster presentations for all solar system bodies. Continue and complete the Mars map oral presentations in the morning, and then in the afternoon we'll go on and talk about the geological maps of small bodies and the outer planet satellites, and then we'll have our final community discussion. We'll report a list of findings to MapSit at a talk that I will give more. That's basically it. I'm happy to take any questions now. If anybody has any questions.
You have to ask questions because we're really early. Anything else to say?
I'll just put up my summary slide here.
Go through it slowly.
Go through it slowly. NASA has supported the geologic mapping and planetary services since the 1960s, working in conjunction with the U.S. Geological Survey. Since the 60s, NASA and the USGS have overseen planetary geologic maps of the Moon, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and supporting maps of the outer planet satellites, particularly the Jovian satellites, the Saturnian satellites. First funded USGS map of the asteroid Vesta, and there's proposals that are in the works for Titan, a proposal for Ceres, and there's one that's been submitted to do it for Pluto. So I think there's over 170 planetary geologic maps that produce, and there's about another 60 that are in various states of production. MapSit is currently working with NASA to streamline the procedures for planetary geologic mapping here in the digital age. What we want to try and accomplish is infrastructure and resources for the planetary mapping community so that we can continue to do geologic mapping in the shortest possible time frame on the board.
All right, we have to cut you off.
Okay. So all geologic mappers are excused to go for the other area. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Dave, before
Yeah.
you do that. So in your slide, you talked about how the geologic mapping process is using ArcGIS, and that's the standard that the USGS uses. But do you have to use ArcGIS, or can you use any compatible GIS software to create and get submitted to the USGS?
I think if the USGS uses ARC, and that's preferred, but if you were more comfortable with, say, QGIS or something, and you then that would be an acceptable form. It just has to be done digitally using a GIS software. If you use one of those other software packages, you're going to increase the work for Trent to try and interpret it into ARC, because I think it has to be reviewed.
The knowledge. So we're working with others to get the GDC if it works on.
The question really was, is there
Data form.
Others for Dave, and Ross, don't go away.
I'm not going away.
Good. Well, Trent, do you want to say something?
Yeah.
So mappers are excused. I have a couple of announcements. So we will have some schedule changes as we go through. We have a change tomorrow afternoon. We'll have a Blender hands-on demo instead of a GDAL. We'll talk about GDAL in the developer sessions. That actually ISAT demo will actually go on Wednesday afternoon in the same switch. Blender demo tomorrow afternoon, ISAT demo Wednesday afternoon. live streaming. And so if you guys don't want that on Nico, and use our camera, and we are capturing with another camera. We're not 100% sure we'll ever get these online, but maybe we'll get them. We are recording audio in the back too, so just let us know if you don't want us to do anything. We'll turn off the cameras, and we're going to record the geologic mappers and the yeah, and so the next speaker needs to come up and put it on when they're done. Oh, right, yeah. So when you're ready to, if you can before the session during the break, put your talk on the laptops.
All right, let's just continue. Our next speaker is Mossfire. The title is The NASA Context for Planetary Spatial Construction.
Should just behind.
All right, so what I'm going to talk to you about today is planetary spatial data infrastructure. Can I see a show of hands of how many people know what that means? Oh, good. All right, that's good. So this talk isn't really for you, okay? But so you can go back to reading your email or doing whatever. But you can also maybe think about watching this talk because maybe you can use this to help you explain it to other people. What is planetary data infrastructure? First off, though, I want to kind of apologize for the spelling of this term. So when I first saw it, I thought, oh gosh, another acronym with these 3 letters in it. It's going to be confusing for me and others. So it's not the Division for Planetary Sciences. It's not the planetary data system, although the planetary data system is a piece of what could be considered a planetary spatial data infrastructure. And it's certainly not the Planetary Sciences Division at NASA headquarters, although we would hope that the Planetary Science Division at NASA headquarters would be paying attention to what the PSDI might be. So what we're going to be about is an overview of that term. Now, this is maybe a new term for a lot of people. I come across new terms in the field all the time, and that's because I'm ignorant, so I'm always learning things. But it's pretty rare that a term like this is brand new, right? This is new to kind of everybody, this concept in planetary sciences. Exactly is a spatial data infrastructure. So this concept has been around in the terrestrial community for almost 20 years now. And this is a diagram of the components of what a spatial data infrastructure could be thought of, right? So over there on the right are the data, right? You have to handle for that. Data is generally accumulating, but generally stable. It's not changing very much. You can think of that as raw data. You can think of that as geologic maps. You can think of that as metadata, right? All data falls into that box. We have it arranged this way. In that middle column are things that may be changing on you, right? So standards to access that data, standards that the data are in, policies that affect how you use the data or access the data. Access networks is a generic term, but it really means the way that you get at the data and the way that you manipulate and use the data. So software tools as well as delivery systems are part of that, right? So, and that's constantly changing, right? 20 years ago, access networks were you driving to an RPIF to look at pictures or sending a letter to the PBS to send you some data. And now that access network is going online to their websites, right? On the left-hand side, people are also part of a spatial data infrastructure. People are the users of the data, people are the producers of that data, right? And all of these things work together in a spatial data infrastructure to do good things, okay? Generally defined. I'm not going to go to the specifics, although we'll do some examples. And so the question is, why should NASA care about this concept of a spatial data infrastructure? And some of the reasons are embedded in the NASA strategic plan, which I'm sure you've all read. But the important 2 pieces that we kind of pulled out are these, right? So NASA's job, so to speak, is to expand the frontiers of knowledge, capability, and opportunity in space. And for the context of this meeting and you, that is places in space, right? The places in space that we explore. Also that NASA should accomplish that mission mandate by effectively managing people, technical capabilities, and infrastructure, right? So we can all go off and have conversations at break time or at the bar about how effectively NASA is doing that management. But I think we can all agree that doing it better would be better for everybody. In a sense, what NASA does is this. This is a generic data knowledge information pyramid. I like to think of it more as a road that stretches out in front of you, right? So you start with data that you gather, and then you somehow, via whatever method, you extract information from that data. From that information, you generate knowledge, hopefully, and eventually wisdom. That's what we get at. In the NASA context, of course, the data is what we gather from our spacecraft about other planets in our solar system and other objects. Information from that data that we collect, knowledge, and that's when we write those papers and those reports. And ultimately, hopefully, we generate some wisdom from those reports that we write. Where should we send that rover? What planet should we explore next? What should we do? How should we go about doing it? And to do that in a manner requires some sort of infrastructure to allow you to go from the bottom up to the top. And from the concept of spatial data, where we are now, I think you can all agree that there are probably barriers at different places. Some data is easier to get up, some is not. And if we look at the programs and infrastructure that kind of exists in this space already, this is kind of what it looks like. You have these kind of bubbles floating in space, right? So archives like the PBS and the Planetary Science Archive, as well as other country archives are there. The International Astronomical Union, of course, defines standards for bodies in the solar system, as well as helps us manage nomenclature. Organization, of course, a geology group here in Flagstaff itself that does a lot of work with spatial data infrastructure, although only recently have we begun calling it that there. The RPIFs, to an extent, also have a hand in planetary spatial data infrastructure. Programs like the Lunar Mapping and Modeling Program also have a data access component. And of course, programs that NASA manages like PDAR, DAPS, Solar System Workings, those programs generate new spatial data, right? Kind of aren't really connected. They're all kind of floating out there in space until you have this concept of a planetary spatial data infrastructure into which they all really can fit, right? So these concepts, these pieces, these elemental pieces of a spatial data infrastructure are things that you already know in a box with a label that we can use to describe it to ourselves. The other things, when you start thinking about infrastructures for planetary spatial data, you can think about, and you can see that we've drawn in this extra bubble here of mission planetary spatial data infrastructures. And kind of walk through what one of those might look like. So if we go back to this kind of spatial looks like, this kind of diagram box, what I tried to do is think about how that would look if we applied it to a high-rise instrument on MRO, right? On the co-eye high-rise instrument. And certainly almost 2 decades ago, when the team was thinking about high-rise and Mars and how they were going to capture data and do science, the concept of a spatial data infrastructure. That wasn't a term that they used or a way in which they thought, but pieces, of course, were there. And so we can try and apply spatial data infrastructure concept to pieces of the high-rise mission, right? So on the right, of course, the data that high-rise collects are the images that we take from the camera and metadata about those images, what the exposure times were, where they were on the planet, all kinds of great information about the images themselves. The people that high-rise is concerned with, of course, fall into 2 groups. The general public that we create the data for, and the high-rise team, right? So the high-rise team are data and producers of the data. They help plan the data. Standards could be the image format that the data are in, the metadata formats that we use. Right? The policies that are applied to these data are mission policies from MRO that high-rise can control, and certainly local team rules. What are the rules for publishing the data? How many co-authors does it have to have? Who has to be on it? What's the rule for data that hasn't been released? Those are all policies. And of course, the access networks, these are just a few. We use the Mars targeting tool, which is a piece of infrastructure on top of JMars to do our mission planning and infrastructure pieces. We use SSH to log into the high-rise servers to pull data. We also have a lot of web services. We have the general high-rise website that anybody can get to. And of course, we also have team websites and access services that provide more detailed looks into the data that we have. Right? What a PSDI might look like for high-rise. If you take a step back about the MRO mission itself, you can imagine that each instrument has its own kind of PSDI, right? High-rise and Prism and CTX. But the problem is that since nobody sat down at MRO at the very beginning and said, all right, what's going to be our planetary spatial data infrastructure? What happened? All of these are separate little things floating by themselves, okay? And even people that are on the teams, and teams that work well together, like high-rise and prison teams, even those two groups have a hard time bridging the gap between their own little spatial data infrastructures, right? It's hard to do cross-correlations. Some of that has been done, certainly, to great effect, but it's difficult. There's a lot of resistance to doing that, just because people in the access networks are all different. And so I hope you can imagine that if there was a structured plan for the whole mission, it would be easier for different teams within the mission to work together, right? This is that after the mission ends, these are great structures, they exist while the mission, but after the mission ends, maybe you get something that looks like this, right? The funding is gone, the teams are gone, their servers are gone. The only thing that's left is the data that they archive with the PDS. Right? I've drawn it here as bullet holes because some data may be missing. You can look at it that way. You can also think of it more as I should have maybe just made the boxes smaller, because sometimes when you're done with something, you need to clean up, right? There's always stuff in your garage. You're like, I'm just gonna hold on to that. Maybe I'll need it. But really, after the mission is done, all the good data has been delivered to the PDS, right? That's a positive way to look at it. That only the good stuff has been condensed and gotten to PDS, and all the other stuff has been hanging on to we don't need. But in some cases, of course, some of the data that teams have isn't delivered to PDS. And I will again make an example of my own team, High-Rise, right? So in our database, we have the images, of course, which are archived with PDS. We have this metadata database. And one of the things you may not know is that every image that comes into the U of A gets tagged by student validators. There are tags. This one had dunes. This one had RSL. Is any of that data archived with the PDS? Nope. Because we do that, once we were in orbit, it wasn't part of the original SIS that defined what we were delivering to PDS, right? And now, at this point, almost 20 years after we've arrived, or 10 years after we've arrived at Mars, no one's going to go back and add that and deliver that data to PDS. It does. I hope it's something we do, but that's an example of stuff that kind of would get lost after the mission goes away. And of course, if the different SDIs use different standards, and that's why I brought them in these different colors, that data too, right? All right, so I hope I have given you an example of why it would be very useful to have a structure, an infrastructure like this for an entire mission, and you can take another step back. Wouldn't it be interesting to have a planetary spatial data infrastructure for a whole planet, so that every mission that went to that planet would be a participant in that infrastructure, and so that even teams from Maven could easily interact with data from MRO. So, I have two more slides, I'll get to them quickly. So why do we need a planetary spatial data infrastructure? And these really are the reasons. We have an increasing amount of data coming from our spacecraft in the solar system, which is great, but it's a lot, we need to manage it. And the data acquisition costs are high, right? It's expensive to send a spacecraft to somewhere else. And more, as time goes on, we find that we can do more great science with cross-domain research teams, and so they need easy access to different kinds of data. And also we need to remove the spatial data expertise as a prerequisite. I know myself and a lot of other graduate students get mired down in map projections and that kind of thing, where if we could just do that for them, science would really get stuff done. And that's how it is in the terrestrial community. And so the goals of the planetary spatial data infrastructure are to provide discovery, access, and exploitation of spatially enabled planetary data for everyone in the planetary sciences community.
Folks, we have plenty of time for questions. Come on.
I basically just spent 13 minutes giving them a definition, so I can understand.
Hi, I was wondering if your metadata table database for iRise, isn't that a good objective for a PR?
Yeah.
That microphone doesn't seem on.
Is that mic on?
Now, 1, 2.
There you
Yeah,
go.
there we go. Okay, thanks, Matt. Could
So-
you repeat?
Yes, so the high-rise metadata database,
Yes.
is that not a good objective for PDR? Did you try?
Oh, it's a great objective for PDR. But it is, and that would be the way to do it. But the point that I was trying to make is that if from the very beginning we had thought about or knew or had some easy way to do that, you would capture more or retain more. But PDART is a great way to come around later and say, oh, you guys thought of this later, let's try and pull that in. And there's also ways for teams to go back to us and say, hey, after we wrote this initial sys years ago when we launched the spacecraft, we did these other great things. We need a little more money to be able to archive these too. And so that's a conversation that teams can have with NASA with varying degrees of success, I'm sure.
So is the idea that, well, let me say it like this, exploration always will find something that was not foreseeable when you plan the mission, right?
That's right.
So you will always have some interesting data sets that you want to add as an official dissemination process later on. Is the PSDI goal to make it more important and more official than PDARTs? Because that, of course, is a risk. You might not get the PDART, there's a lot of competition. But there will be unforeseeable things, and we need a process and funding to add them later.
Yeah, so that's certainly something that MAPSIT team would advocate to NASA. It's something that I know that the PDS roadmap effort right now that's also advocating that kind of an approach to NASA. And so we're thinking about planetary spatial data infrastructure in a big way, and there will be more talks later this week that will talk more about the details of different pieces, is certainly a goal.
So Ross, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes.
So speaking on the PDS side, now and I represent the PDS Geosciences Node, so I'm going to step away as chair and make a comment that might lead to a question. Really closely with missions to try to get products that weren't defined early on products into the PDS. It really becomes a question of the amount of money the teams have and whether or not we can actually get that going and moved into the PDS. I mean, for example, for CRISM, I suspect at the end of the mission, there'll be a lot of products coming to the PDS that weren't necessarily all defined in the original SIS. We work with each of the DAP proposers or the PDART proposals that support that we will take the data they produce. It goes through a peer review like a journal article, and it will come into the PDS. So we're trying as best we can to make sure those products that are highly derived, that the science community needs the most, really get into the PDS. There are also some efforts that are kind of subparts of, for example, there are several capabilities in the PDS that allow you to do cross-instrument searches on MRO, and call it coordinated, in which HiRISE, CTX, and CRISM are all collected together. And it's the intent of MRO is to collect those together and set in our searches to actually find those coordinated observations. So we're not there yet, right? But we're not as bad as separate kind of pieces. You know, some of it actually is integrated. There'll be presentations during the next 3 to 4 days that kind of illustrate that.
Russ, you might want to highlight Lisa's talk that defined the difference between PDS and this.
The difference. Why don't you come up and
Oh.
get it on the record?
This is a confusing topic, the PDS versus PSDI, and so Lisa has a talk later in the week about what she perceives, what the MAPSIT perceives as the difference. That gets clarified. So hopefully that will help.
Right. And data is a very, very important piece, but it's not the only piece.
Any other?
Yes.
Yes.
So you talked about different PSDIs, 19 on particular missions. Do you have any thoughts on how to bridge those separate PSDIs and perhaps a unified vision for PSDI for the entire mission?
We will have talks on Thursday. Is that when your talk is, Jay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there will be talks later in the week that cover those topics. And we encourage you to stay for the MAPSIT on Thursday morning. We'll go over this.
All righty, we actually are on time now. that's a good thing. So the next presentation is by Bland et al., and it's assessing the variability and relative accuracy of digital terrain models of Europa.
Is that working?
Thank you. Information is obviously critical to planetary exploration, both from a scientific point of view and from a mission safety point of view. There's a number of ways to derive elevation information, which is stereogrammetry and the digital terrain models that are derived from stereogrammetry. There's been a lot of effort to understand the variability in digital terrain models that are produced from stereogrammetry. And here are a couple of examples. Data where you see 8 different methodologies to produce digital terrain models compared to an orbital image. We see a comparison in crater shapes derived from a stereo pipeline and from socket set. Unfortunately, in the outer solar system, emphasis on the variability in digital terrain models and how they may affect our scientific results. From Schmidt et al. 2011, this is a very influential paper which suggests that there is perched water in the ice shell of Europa, or there are some cases regions where there were perched water that has been since frozen. And this is an extremely exciting result that's in part driving the Europa missions. It's based on a digital terrain model, and it's this long wavelength deflection over the chaos regions based on. But no one has really gone in and tried to assess how what the variability in this long wavelength deflection actually is. We need a much better understanding topography of Europa and other bodies in the outer solar system if we actually want to land on them, as is the kind of current push. So if we're going to use terrain relative navigation and have something like 100-meter size landing ellipse, understanding of the surface, and to do that, we need to understand how what the variability is in our data products. Models system face a number of challenges that are a little bit different from those used in the inner solar system. First, absolute elevation, is poorly constrained. So there's no altimeter data in the outer solar system except for Titan, and so there's no global reference set similar to MOLA on Mars for it to compare our elevation models to. Relative, and it's difficult to assess TTM accuracy. There's also a number of data challenges in the outer solar system with the currently existing data, and I think the easiest way to illustrate that is with an example. So here are 2 images that make up a stereo pair. These are both of Europa. This is the crater Quill, kilometer diameter crater. These are about the best 2 images that we have of the crater Quill. Topography from this, you can see that there's either relatively low resolution images, 245 meters per pixel, 126 meters per pixel over here. Very different resolution between the 2, about a factor of 2. The lighting here is very inconsistent. This is a low inclination image. This is a more moderate inclination image. The angle is very different. And so sometimes you get stereo. The base to height ratio here is about 1.83. Recommended value for stereo is 0.4 to 0.6. Factor of 4 or so beyond that. And so our expected precision from the stereo pair is 20 to 30 meters. As I'll show on the next slide, there's often very poor spikes between the 2 images as well. So this is very common. This is just an uncontrolled mosaic. I just projected them, laid them on top of each other where they wanted to be. So here you can see the crater piece that's sticking out in this data gap, which I forgot to point out. But this data gap here is due to incomplete download of the data from Galileo. Up there, if you're standing in the front, this is the center of the crater. You see there's a kind of a tabular ridge over here. It's repeated over here. 20-kilometer offset between these two images, uncontrolled. So this makes it difficult to just kind of throw your images at something like AIM stereo pipeline and get reasonable results out. And so is to assess the variability of DTMs in the outer solar system, where data quality is much lower, where we don't have a global reference to compare the data to, using different types of software. So primarily we're using SocketSet and AIM stereo pipeline. These are the two most common technologies in the outer solar system. There are some kind of homebrew methods that are also used as well. We're looking at different methodologies and assumptions within each of these systems. Variability between different users, different experience levels. What's the difference if you've been making DTMs for years and years, or if you just, you write a proposal to use AIM stereo pipeline, you pick it up and you get your DTMs out. Is there variability in there? Yes. The time and cost trade-off as well. And the real goal here is to really understand what the real uncertainty is in these digital terrain models. Not the formal uncertainty, not the expected precision. How well do we actually know what the topography is? So how well, if we care about crater depth, something that I look at a lot in my science, relaxation of craters and the rebound of craters, how well do I actually know how deep that crater is? What if I use SocketSet to produce my elevation model and pipeline? What if I farmed it out to an expert that's been doing this for years and years? Would I get the same answer back? In addition, or as we kind of assess those questions, we also want to provide a best practice for the outer planets community and identify methodologies that work and potential pitfalls. Explicitly not doing in this project. So we're not trying to determine who's right and who's wrong, right? We have no to compare the digital elevation models to each other. We're not trying to evaluate which method is better in some type of qualitative or quantitative sense. This, as you'll see in this talk, really depends on what you're using the DTMs for. Creating DTMs for every stereo pair on Europa in this project, we really want to get into the guts of the methodology. What methodologies work best? Methodologies are a little bit problematic. Okay, so to do this, we're creating individual DTMs using both SocketSet and AIM stereo pipeline. Sites, Silix crater, Brill crater, which you saw, and Agnor Linea. This is Silix crater over here. This is just an ortho image out of SocketSet. Then we evaluate each individual DTM. We compare the contours to the ortho images. We're assessing the textures, seeing identify small-scale features, the DTMs to each other in a pairwise sense. So SocketSet to SocketSet, AIM stereo pipeline, and SocketSet to AIM stereo pipeline. We first do a rigid transform using PC align to align the DTMs to do a comparison. Difference maps, individual profiles, we look at slope maps, all the things you'd want to do. And we haven't quite got here yet. We also are going to use some more quantitative approaches, such as looking at the slopes over various baselines, calculating the Hurst exponent, etc. Okay, so if we jump right in, this is a comparison, just some profiles between SocketSet and SocketSet, two different methods here. So one, and I'm sorry this may be hard to see on the screen, solution. So this just uses the nadirmost image as fixed. Everything is adjusted relative to it. Curves. This is fairly equivalent to what AIM stereo pipeline does. A type of solution is termed an independent solution. So all images can be adjusted independently. Control to them. Products. We PC align them. And now I've just extracted profiles as a way to kind of show the variability in these. So that the red lines here, if you can make them out, are the profiles. See that the two solutions are pretty close to agreement. We think most of this difference is just due to subtle differences in how they've been edited and subtle differences in the post spacing like this. Now, I'm sure in anticipation for this talk, all of you read the abstract that's online, and you see that this result is slightly different in the abstract, in which we saw greater variability between these two different methods. It turns out that that variability was due to a subtle horizontal shift in terrain models. And so something we need to pay more attention to, the horizontal positioning of these DTMs relative to each other, which when you PC align them, you don't actually see. But if you just set them down on top of each other, which is what we did for the abstract, and that horizontal variability is less important perhaps for science, but it's very critical for spacecraft safety and on Europa. We also have looked, of course, at ASP versus ASP, and what you're looking at here are 48 different digital terrain models, the hillshade here by David Mayer. So across the top, you see variations in the correlation kernel size. So this is the size of the little red box that you move around looking for matches on the surface. You see the subpixel refinement parameter. So this is kind of your fine adjust knob, increasing as you go downwards. And it's blinking 3 different DTMs across here. And these are the differences in what pre-filter kernel was used. So 1.4, 1.5, and 3. The big jump that you see is to 3. And this pre-filter kernel is basically the width in pixels and filter that's applied to denoise the data a little bit. The highest quality hillshades are kind of in this upper left corner, and they decrease downward. So if you look at this DTM, you can make out quite a few small-scale features. If some of this information is actually noise that's being amplified here, but something in this region is a pretty good result. As you move down this way, you get very smooth. You lose much of the texture. You lose many of the small-scale features. The great thing about ASP is that you can do this type of analysis to really hone in work for your specific data set. And so that's something that we're continuing to do. The comparison between socket set and ASP. Here we have socket set, the DTM on the left and the hillshade below, A-serial pipeline on the right. They have a little bit different post spacing here, 350 meters on the left, 258. You can see that in this case, for this data set at least, that the socket set is picking up a little bit finer scale detail. So the crater is resolved pretty well, but these small scale ridges, especially this kind of ridge, is not well resolved in the ASP DTM. Out on the hillshade as well. Of a difference map between these. So reds are regions where ASP has higher elevation, blue is where socket has higher elevation. So again, you can see these blue ridges in here. Interior of this crater is very similar between the two, and this really pops out well if we look at some profiles. So these top 3 are profiles of the interior of the crater, and you can see, especially if you look at this, that the crater depth is similar between these profiles. So if you just want to look at kind of broad scale features, ASP and socket set are fairly comparable. Picking out some of the finer scale details, and if we look at these ridges over here, you can see that they're pretty well resolved in socket set. They're not as well resolved in ASP. And in some cases, we get quite variable topography. Careful if you're doing science or if you're trying to land a spacecraft and you have this much variability in your digital terrain models. So, in kind of summary, to date, some of the advantages and challenges, these are probably well known to many of you that develop digital terrain models, but fast. That's good because it allows you to explore a very large parameter space. It would take you a very long time to create those 48 DTMs that I showed a few slides ago, and very well documented. And the DTMs do capture broad scale features well. If I'm interested in crater depths, which I often am, pipeline is probably good enough for me to do my work. There are some challenges with ASP. Control the images before we use them, and by control, I mean we needed to actually use ISIS to do a full jigsaw bundle adjustment before we could use them in ASP. We've had a little bit of trouble using multiple images. The DTMs are smoother. There's a greater number of blunders. The socket set has some advantages. The manual editing, you get finer detail in the digital terrain models, ridges, and of course the well-known challenges from Socket set is that it's quite time-consuming, more money, requires specialized software, workstations, and training. And I will just stop there. Sorry.
Okay, so we've run out of time. Still around, right?
Yes, you can find me later. Thank you.
And continuing about topography, and it's ground and all, AIM stereo pipeline, and LROC ASU digital terrain model DTM comparison.
Oh, thank you. All right, hello everyone. My name is Holly Brennan from the LROC team at ASU. People have been curious about how the LROC NAC DTMs produced by the NASA AIM stereo pipeline compare with the DTMs at ASU. To understand how the digital terrain models compare to each other, we conducted both qualitative and quantitative analyses to each other. So this presentation is going to show you how we did the comparison and the results. Background on the DTM production. Both sets of derived from LROC narrow angle camera NAC stereo observations, calibrated to IORF using USGS ISIS. Pipeline, as we just learned about, is a suite of open source automated geodesy and stereogrammetry tools designed for processing cartographic products. There's an example of that on the left. The ASU DTMs are processed using a combination of socket set, which is a commercially available photometric product, PAA systems, and MATLAB and USGS ISIS. Both ASU and AIMS DTMs use the Lunar Orbiter Laser Altimeter, or LOLA profiles, as ground control points. And the NAC stereo observations combined with the LOLA profiles create representations of the topographic surface. So an overview of our comparison. First, every DTM from AIMS and ASU was qualitatively ranked based on the presence of artifacts, noise, and holes. Quality matching AIMS and ASU DTMs were compared for quantitative analysis. Quantitative analysis, the DTMs were compared in terms of pixel-to-pixel horizontal offsets. So here's the qualitative ranking system. Each DTM for both ASU and AIMS was given a ranking between 5 and 0. 5 being reserved for the which have no missing data or no holes, no. And as we go down the ranking system, we see that holes become larger, and as artifacts and noise become more pervasive. 0 is given to DTMs that have holes that are not associated with the input images. So typically in ASU, holes or artifacts and noise are associated with high relief topography or shadows in the NAC images. So the holes that we see at 0 are more or less random. And then I have some examples up here. Yay, okay. So this is an example DTM of a rank of 3 because there's some holes that make up
for the DTM, and then artifacts and noise on the, here's an example of an artifact. And then this is the corresponding ASU DTM, which is given a rank 5 because there are no. Here are more examples of a DTM given a rank of 0 because these are random holes that are present in the DTM. If this Ames DTM did not have these random holes, it would be given a rank of 3 because here's holes and artifacts present. Corresponding ASU DTM is given a rank of 4 because there's a hole right there. These ASU DTM are both given a rank of 5. So for our qualitative statistics, we see that overall the ASU DTMs are ranked 5 to 4, that being ranked 3 to 1, and 1 DTM being ranked 0. We see that the majority of them, 41%, and 26% are ranked 0. For our quantitative analysis, we did all the ASU and Ames DTMs. We see that the majority of the ASU DTMs are ranked 98%, and for the Ames 80%. And then down here is the average rank qualitative ranks of both the DTM products. So here's some background on our quantitative study. So overall, there were 65 matching Ames and ASU DTMs that were made from the same sets of stereo observations. Then further culled to 43 to include only ASU DTMs made after July of 2013. Methods were implemented, which resulted in more accurate DTMs that are representative of our current data products, and we actually plan to remake the DTMs that were made prior to July 2013. A table showing the ASU DTMs compared in the analysis and their production date. You will see that about half were made in 2013, 2014, and the other half later on. DTMs were created in 2014. So both the Ames and ASU with the DTMs be made at a ground sampling distance of at least 3 times the input next. All the Ames DTMs that were viewed in our quantitative analysis were meter per pixel. So we had to first downsample them in order to match the pixel scales of the corresponding ASU DTMs, which were 2 to 3 to 5 meters per pixel. For the methodology, first we compared the horizontal positioning using a co-registration tool in ISIS. We did this by doing pixel by pixel comparisons by forcing one DTM to cartograph and match the other, and then we recorded set magnitudes between the DTM products. And then we compared the DTMs to the Lola profiles. And so both the ASU and Ames have developed their own tools unique to each DTM production process. So both the DTMs were ran through each tool, and then the offsets were recorded. Register Lola is developed an automated tool using the automation toolbox within MATLAB. And the Ames PC Align tool uses the iterative closest point algorithm. And then we also looked at the Lola plots from both the tools. And so here's some trends that we saw during co-registration. Saw that between the DTMs, the horizontal offset pattern suggested a mix of translational, scaling, and then a combination of these effects. So the DTMs didn't perfectly match each other in the XY direction. Results. So we produced arrow plots in MATLAB, and we can see that this is an example of scaling or contraction, where the arrows in the top are down and in the south. This is just an example of contraction. We saw that the average horizontal offset magnitude between the Ames and ASU DTMs was 19.5 meters. Here's a little background on the Lola comparison tools. PC Align uses a translation vector to output the average distance between the DTM point and the Lola point. It outputs average offsets and then average latitude, longitude, and elevation offsets, and they're recorded as northeast down coordinates, which are in meters. Aligns the altimeter profiles from LOLA to the DTM, and outputs and then RMS offsets for latitude, longitude, and elevation. So here are the results. Overall, we found that both ASU and Ames DTMs have comparable offsets relative to LOLA, but with a few exceptions. And being average offsets, we see that with the register LOLA tool and the ASU DTMs, we get a much lower than we do with ASU DTMs PC Align and with Ames DTMs with both tools. And I'm not really quite sure why that is, so we're going to look into that in the future. With latitude and longitude offsets, we see that with both DTMs and with both tools, we get comparable results. Then with elevation offsets, we see that the ASU DTMs with both the register LOLA and PC Align tool, we get about 2 times lower than the Ames DTMs. So on these results, for the average error for the average offsets is expected to be less than the DTM's ground sampling distance. ASU DTM using register LOLA meets this requirement. For latitude and longitude offsets, based on LOLA profile accuracies, they're supposed to be about less than 10 meters horizontally. You see that? And then elevation offsets, elevation offsets less than 1 meter vertically is ideal. We see that the ASU DTM. So the register LOLA produces plots of the vertical offsets between the LOLA profiles and the DTM. And by examining these plots, we found that 3 of the Ames DTMs, there was a systematic 18-meter average elevation tilt. And then in 2 of the ASU DTMs, there was a 1 meter average elevation tilt. On the left, here's just an example of about a 15-meter tilt down here in the southern portion of the DTM. And ASU, we don't see that on this plot. And then here is a more extreme example. We see that there's around a 16-meter tilt of the data in the north-south direction in this Ames DTM. And then here's the corresponding matching ASU DTM. And then here are the PC Align LOLA error plots. So PC Align records the errors in absolute value. So over here, here's a curve because we don't think that it's just it's an absolute value. So we cannot determine tilt from the PC Align. But overall, between the register LOLA and the PC Align plots, we see that they are pretty comparable. Back and forward. Okay, so conclusions. In terms of absolute uncertainty, the 2 sets of DTMs are comparable. DTMs overall 33% are qualitatively ranked 5 to 4, 41% are ranked 3 to 1, and 26% are ranked 0. The 43 DTMs compared for quantitative analysis, ranked 5 to 4, and 42% are ranked. ASU DTMs are qualitatively ranked 5 to 4, 14% are ranked, supposed to say 1 to 3, and then 1 is ranked 0. The 43 DTMs compared for the quantitative are ranked 5 to 4, and for DTMs, we see an average 18-meter tilt when compared with the register LOLA tool. And the ASU DTMs, we saw a 1 meter average tilt. DTMs are oversampled, which means that the DTM pixel scale is less than or equal to the native image pixel scale. Just introduces noise. But the Ames DTMs are abundant. There are 1,001 available, and here's where you can find them. Since the process of removing defects and accurately registering the DTMs to LOLA takes additional time and effort, the ASU DTMs are less abundant than the Ames DTMs. There's 382, 36 mosaics, and thank you. Take questions.
Fortunately, to stay on time, we need to skip the questions. So speakers, please try to. So we'll continue talking with messenger data, and the speaker will be
Hi, I'm Natalie Manheim. I'll also be talking about, and here we use the term DEMs, but as the DTMs the previous two. Discussing the methods we use to produce messenger digital elevation models from.
I'm going to suggest that you move that to the other side. Okay. This one's better than yours.
From under narrow camera images. I'll also be presenting 9 new messenger DEMs that we created at ASU, highest resolution DEMs that are currently available out there. So the messenger mission launched in 2004. It entered its Mercury orbit in 2011, and the mission was completed in April of 2015. MDIS, or the Mercury Dual Imaging System, consisted of 2 frame cameras and a wide-angle camera. The NAC wasn't actually a stereo camera. Operator observations over the course of the mission, and these allow us to create DEMs. Closest approach is a pixel scale of 5 meters. For comparison, the wax at closest approach had a pixel scale of about 36 meters. Data from MLA, Mercury Laser Altimeter, which had a radial accuracy of about within 20 meters, but it was only available really for the northern hemisphere, and that's because messenger had a really elliptical orbit with a periapsis of 200 to 500 kilometers near the North Pole, and an approximate of about 10 to 15,000 kilometers. So I'm going to go through the methods we use to create our DEMs, particularly focusing on the process for choosing sites and choosing images. Again, because the NAC wasn't a stereo camera, stereo pairs or sets of images that would give us good stereo, we had to search through all the images in our region of interest to find fortuitously acquired combinations of images, of overlapping images, conditions, and the imaging geometry that we need to extract good stereo. So, the way we use those images to create DEMs in ISIS and Socketset, we create for PDW. Our image selection guidelines here were adapted from ECRA et al. 2015. And these parameters I'm showing here, these color gradings, represent which values we prefer to use to create stereo. So the blue indicates possible values, the yellow is acceptable, and the red values will probably not produce good stereo. And what I mean by good stereo here is produce DTMs that are precise to our standards. So these first 2 parameters, incidence angle and emission angle, apply to individual images, and use that to narrow down the pool of all images in our region of interest. With that's done, we identify stereo pairs, the percentage of overlap between the images, at the ratio of the image's pixel scales, stereo, which is essentially a parallax, and then illumination compatibility, which is a shadow tint. We made 9 DMs built up out of 49 messenger map images. And what I'm showing here with these black bars are for our data for each parameter, sorry, for our images, the minimum value, the maximum value, and then the average value. So you can see that we did a pretty good job of sticking to those blue and yellow regions, but we did kind of venture out into that red, especially in that stereo category where we go out to the right, I think about the 1.4 regions where we weren't able to get the coverage that we needed with just those images that would give us the best stereo. So in those cases, maybe we sacrificed a little precision. More likely we just had to work a lot harder, spend a lot more time in order to achieve a precision. So the other part of choosing images is getting the coverage that we need. Here I'm showing the 21 images that we used to build up our standard crater mosaic, which was our largest DM mosaic of the 9. These are the footprints of those images. And from those 21 images, we found 36 stereo pairs for areas of overlap. And the footprints that I'm showing here are actually of the DEMs that we ended up making. We made these in socket set with generated orthophotos, and then we extract we export the DEMs and orthophotos out of socket set. We'll mosaic all of these together to create one final large area DEM. All right, so once our images are selected, we'll do some pre-processing using ISIS and the most recent available. We input the images into socket set relative triangulation. So we tie the images together with tie points, usually about 9 points per area of overlap between images in a set and then between stereo pairs. And then we'll run a bundle adjustment to align the images to each other. We register the images to MLA, the MLA tracks or profiles. We'll run a bundle adjustment. However, again, because MLA data only really exists for the northern hemisphere, for 2 of our DEMs, we weren't able to register them, so there's no absolute orientation for those. 3, there were actually no MLA tracks that directly overlapped with the NAC images. In those cases, we found a workaround. So what we did was we found wax stereo pairs that overlapped with the NAC images. To tie the NAC and the wax really well together. So we tie the NAC to the wax, and then we tie the wax to the MLA, where we register the wax MLA. And by bundle adjusting all this together, we can get that absolute orientation. Once that's done, we extract the DEM using the Endgame tool in socket set, and we make our DEMs at a pixel scale of 3 times the resolution of the image. Orthophotos again in socket set at the resolution of the DEM and at the resolution of the lowest resolution of the image. And then we export that DEM and its orthophotos, accompanying orthophotos out of socket set. Multiple stereo pairs, we mosaic those together using ISIS. And then with ISIS and GDAL, we create additional data products for the PDF. Here, again, this is our standard mosaic, and these are the products that we provide. The DEMs, the orthophotos at 2 resolution, confidence map. In a geotip format, we have the terrain shade, color shade, slope map, a 32-bit DEM, the color shade, and the slope map. File for every DEM that we and that contains some error analysis information. Socket set calculates for every DEM that we make a vertical precision or relative linear error And we want that relative linear error to be within the pixel scale of the DM. The error analysis results for these 9 DMs that we made, you can see that we did achieve this vertical precision equal to or less than the pixel scale of the display. Looking at the positional accuracy, we do this by taking our DMs and comparing them to MLA. So you can see here again, standard MLA tracks that overlap it. And of course, we can only do this for those DMs that have MLA tracks, so 2 of them don't have any of this data. That were tied to NAC images, we get offsets by looking at the offsets between the WAC images and MLA. And because MLA radial accuracy within 20 meters, we ideally would have an average offset for each DDM of within that. Looking at our results, we weren't quite able to accomplish that. Our worst statistic by far in that top row is control greater. And that's kind of because, as indicated by the asterisk there, tied to a WAC stereo pair, and then the WAC was compared to MLA. Our WAC DMs lower, a much worse vertical precision and coarser resolution. So we did, with the exception of that Catalyst DM, we did have a mean offset that was within the pixel scale for every other case. The DMs and their associated products made an ASU were released to the public in
We were having the volume turned up.
in December of 2016. They are available through the PDS imaging node. Thanks.
We have time for questions, folks. Come on. Brad. So could you say who you are, Fred?
I'm Fred. No, Fred Gale of JPL. Great talk. Love seeing all the details about your processing. Kind of a question I had for all the talks was the figure of merit socket set. Do you provide that with the data sets that you're releasing so we can understand where there's interpolation versus actual data?
Essentially, yeah. It's not quite the same thing as what you would draw in the socket set, but this confidence map that we produce does give that figure of merit. So if you look in the README, break down the values in the confidence map and precision we can expect.
Any other questions? All righty, we have one more talk before the break, and that's by Becker, and it's a new method of doing control map synthesis.
My name is Chris Becker from the U.S. Geological Survey, and we were talking today about a new approach to create image control networks in ISIS that we have recently developed. Our motivation for this new approach was due to work with the messenger team to produce global control mosaics. Our existing procedures that we have in ISIS are not well suited to handle the number of images that we were dealing with as we control networks that were created because we needed the density. The new approach focuses more on, emphasizes more on dealing with image-based processing, an emphasis on resource management like CPU, memory, and even human intervention, which is a critical part of the control networks. The existing ISIS applications were used where applicable, where we could use them, and simply because of the sheer size of the control networks themselves, the visualization tools that exist in ISIS, we could not even use them because of the size. So we had to ensure some confidence in the networks that we were creating without having to visualize them. We had sufficient quality without that process. So we developed new image matching techniques and new tools that help in the management of those control networks. A few words about control networks. For anybody who's not familiar with them, they basically associate a ground control latitude coordinate with image pixel coordinates. In order to create a good control network, we need to basically identify all images with common and populate the control network with precise image measurements, features that exist within the overlapping regions. That basically creates depth in our control network at these points. We want to create a system of well-distributed points, not only in images themselves, but also that they're well-distributed on the target body. And we want to ensure that all images are connected by the control points to avoid images that are not part of the network. We created or embedded into our program Jigsaw, which computes the least squares bundle adjustment. That basically provides us with a minimization of the errors in the pointing, the attitude, and the space transitions. The 5 applications that are part of this approach that I'm going to be talking about today, we'll jump right into talking about them right now. ISIS Miner is the first one. It helps us mine through large data sets. 20 algorithms that we call strategies that are currently available in the program. And these algorithms operate on data, which we call resources. Resources come from databases, they come from PDL files, CSV files, and many other sources as well. The A priori spice produced by CAM-info for each image is our primary resource. The ISIS Miner scripts were developed in the image-based processing in mind that determined for each of the images of common features, and then we also used it to run fine features on those overlapping. This is well suited to be dispatched to compute cluster environments for parallel processing. We can add features to ISIS Miner through development of plugins for strategy algorithms, and those things can be loaded at runtime to expand the capabilities pretty easily. Find Features is our image-based, feature-based image matching program. Provides access to, it utilizes the OpenCV detector and matcher algorithms. Some of these algorithms are not scale and rotation invariant, so we provide a fast geom option, which basically transforms one image into the other image space to consistency. These matches can do pairs or a list of images, which is what we use for the overlapping data. And we can read ISIS cubes as well as any other format as CD. But note that if you're using non-ISIS font formats, these will not be available. The algorithms in ISIS in the program are also for OpenCV are interchangeable. Parameters within each one of those algorithms can be modified by the user as deemed necessary. So added a robust outlier detection method. False positive matches and remove them. This outlier detection process is new to ISIS. Usually it ends up being in the Jigsaw program or beyond. 4 different tests that we use in order to identify these outliers. The first one being the ratio test, matching the matches between the 2 images to the closest match in the other image that ensures there's adequate distance between them so that uniqueness can be confirmed. Symmetry test, which ensures that the match in one image to the second image also, when the reverse is applied, that match also matches that other one. The mammography test uses Ransack to compute a mammography matrix, and it tests the spatial relationship between the two images, the two matched images. Reprojection error in the control points that were picked. The epipolar test that uses the fundamental matrix, the epipolar line correspondence, and we use that to test the 3D relationship between the two images. One feature that's provided by Find Features is to be able to produce a lot of debugging information out there that will help when a lot of these outliers are thrown out. And you can then modify those parameters in the application itself to help with managing of those outlier detection processes. A couple of examples of Find Features. We have two images here for the WAC messenger WAC images. On the left, we have the truth image, the resolution at 323 millimeters per pixel. In our control point, and it actually is referred to as the query image in OpenCV. An image with 182 meters per pixel resolution, and that's referred to as the trainer image. You can see the general form of the program that's run to produce these examples. From one to the other is ONET, which is the name of the output network, and then the algorithm specified that produces these examples. Examples, we use the fast genome option, so we have spatial consistency. The first examples are going to be using, demonstrating the use of what they call feature 2D frameworks. These detect these, both the detector and the extractor algorithm. And we're looking here at a few that this one here has to do the case detector. Through a few other examples. This one is the first example. Then we have SIFT, which are some of the more popular ones coming up here, SIFT and then SURF. Detector. Wanted to throw in the orb detector because it basically clusters around craters, and I think this would be a good candidate for crater studies. Now we're getting into examples that show the interoperability of the algorithms. I like to use the fast detector. It's a quarter detector, and it produces a lot of key points fast. And this now here we're showing how we can use the latch extractor to get off points. This extractor. And finally, the brief extractor. So you can see we get some really dense control networks from this process. And then a few other less popular ones: the star detector with the SIFT extractor, the detector with the brief extractor. So there's a lot of variations you can use in order to get some desired results from image matching. Next program is CNET Spinner. This helps control the point density we're going to see in some of these networks that are generated through this process. It's typically used and very helpful to thin out the networks when the desired product is simply just control, and you don't really need a DEM as a final product. It significantly reduces the amount of time and the efficiency in subsequent processing, so it's a case. Any method that we use for this particular program is to extend in image space and then not in target body ground coordinates. Nice resolutions in our coverages within our images. And the best points from the robust matching that are in the key point matching response are the ones that are in this process. And there is a ability to weight the number of measures per point so that the figures retain the depth in our control network. I wanted to show a CNET example. This is based on the SURF detection. We basically started out with 1,115 points. 150 of those for an efficiency of about 90%. You're going to see when you apply these things to most image matching networks. The next program is CNET Combined VT, and what this does is combines all of our smaller image-based networks into large networks. There's all the common measures across all the points, and computes the difference between the reference image and the control point and the distance to the other points, and average is less than the tolerance that are combined. And we recommend using the same HMG tolerance that was used in Find Features as the image tolerance in this application. Order does matter because we run through the order in which the control points are provided by the user. So control networks that have more quality, you want to use those first in the order list. And we highly recommend running point match after running CNET Combined VT because it's now using a re-reference image, and they have to be re-registered. It provides with subjects of accuracy or control network, which is very important for GSI. Our final program is CNET to DEM. The purpose of this program is to create an output digital elevation model with supporting statistics at each output map pixel. Users can define projections, they can define scale and range of the output cartographic product. Global, it could be even regional if this so desired. There's 14 bands of data that's computed for this. We provide access to 3 different interpolation algorithms for the DEM itself, for the natural neighbor. And then 11 statistical bands at each output map pixel, minimum, maximum, average, median, and standard deviation of the radii used to the control points. And finally, we provide a point count in each map pixel that was used in the interpolation process as well. Here is the results of our messenger control network, the DEM control network. This is actually displayed in QView, so the QView tools can be used to help analyze these control networks very easily. Here, algorithm is used to improve the distance output map pixel to the closest control point. And the dark regions are points that have the control point closest to the center map pixel, and the white regions are areas where we have control points that are further away from these pixels. On the left, there is a histogram that is computed for this as well. Instead, the average is around 2.3 kilometers to the closest map pixel. So a product about 2 kilometers per pixel will be generated through this process. And you can also do some other creative stretching within QView. This one basically highlights the black pixels in this case that are less than or equal to 2 kilometers to the center map pixel. And conversely, you also now have in this situation where you can stretch to find the control points are very far away. It would indicate going in and looking at those areas in the network to improve work so that you have a better result. The goal was to produce the DEM, and this shows our results of the messenger global DEM that we did last year. Over 100,000 images were used in this process. These were map and YFG images. About 12.6 million control points that had more than 7 million measures in the network itself. By far the largest network we've ever created in ISIS. So accuracy, note that the point range was not run on this data set due to time constraints, and so we are achieving less than pixel accuracy in the output results. We added some color images as well, so it's very well suited to add new images as needed. Just to do control 8, 5, and 3 control products. These products, maps, the DEM, and the control data is all available and archived in the PDS right now. Building these large control networks are very challenging. Image-based processing techniques that help with provide more flexibility and more efficiency. And the robust feature-based matching was extremely processed because it provides the density needed to interpolate decent DEMs. And the network tools and the tools we provide to analyze and manage the networks are very helpful as well. Currently available in the ISIS release that we have now to make sure that the feature-based matching is better, as well as utilize threading throughout the applications as we go. Finally, the control network itself, the in-memory structure and the file format is redesigned because that's really the biggest problem we have and it's just hard to get. And that's it.
Because high-res images are so large, often even only a regional analysis would be straining resources. I use these tools, or some of them, if all I want to do is bind high-res data to Mola.
You want to bind the data itself rather than match, or simply just match as well?
Co-register the high-res observations to Mola.
Co-register. We haven't actually tested those large images. It basically is a memory constraint. So if you can load these images into memory, which is required by OpenTV, it's worth a try to make that happen. Things we want to improve in the future is to actually use segmentation of these images to do well.
Another one is on me. This is all happening before map projection, right?
That's right.
Which means there shouldn't be any issue with Norwegian interests in full exterior graphic projection.
Using map projection is supported by ICES to actually produce those final products.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? We're officially on break, but be back here by 10:30, please.
I'm going to ask for your help as you're leaving. If you have empty chairs around your table, a minute and drag one or two of them to the back of the room, where a lot of people are kind of coming and going, effect of the concurrent sessions.
So we don't have to vote.
I did ask the facilities people to move the tables back about 5 feet, but they'll do that at lunchtime, so beware. Stay tuned on that. I know it might affect your access to power, but I'm sure it'll be a little less crowded.
All right, so where can I access that?
I think I did.
Finally, over lunchtime, you should be able to leave your laptop. We're gonna lock this room. We might have some people that we know and love, senior and watch out.
So we're able to log into my embassy credentials to get that. All right. I've got SSH and everything. That's fantastic. I need some time this weekend. Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, may have a favor for you. If we could have you, so I have someone who's getting, wants to do a demo. And they did lock my 422, and if we can have she needs
Potentially. I think that any network allows, they want to know open VPN to go through, but I think they allow PPTP. I could probably look up a set of PPTP credentials you can use real quick.
Okay, it's Jay. Do you know Jay Long?
I'm sure I've seen him about 100 times.
There's a guy in yellow. You want to go talk to him?
Okay.
He was because of the senior director. He's probably, but he might be here yet. Very good.
Yeah, it's good.
Good. How you been doing?
What's that?
How you been doing?
Been okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? Yeah.
Busy.
Busy. Yeah, you must have your hands in a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just trying to keep. Since we lost, since we had a lot of people retire, the last year or so, it's been strange trying to cover different things. So just slowly get over that, but also to just shed some of that work.
Bringing on new people to help.
I'm trying, yeah. Brought on David from Chicago. He was working at Geoscience for a little bit, and he was working with Edwin Knight doing share pipeline stuff. So just need help. So he's good. Question?
Yep.
In terms of so this is our list that says, okay, we're the ones but at least we kind of know that 33 doesn't matter. It's still going to go through farm. Okay, fine. So we know. Now, one thing that we do, I think that Esmus doesn't do, which I think is going to be a problem for us, is Esmus reports every bit of the property. They don't know what it's science. We're filtering out all the people that see I'm not saying so one of the things I've asked the outside guys to do is give us another view about that. 33 tests. They're two separate
Yeah, the problem with it's different than video. Well, they just went and said they didn't like us. At least at the point this.
Yeah, I think
So
we've got it.
So the issue is
is
automatically
generate
so we need, yeah, we need to make it clear.
Do you have a second?
Yeah.
You ready to announce this?
So this is actually on our site, but I want to tell you that we're doing it. Yeah, so if you guys use that report, so you don't have all the data, you can do the analysis automatically. Well, so the good question. How many people are we might get into a question about mission. How many people are using this kind of data? So one of the things that we did is by mission. It's a little complicated because one that we know what's happening. So that's
and then you're also set up in Legacy? Yeah. Anything else? I just wanted to know that. Yeah.
Well, I think the worry is that people will really count this.
Well, that was yeah.
Yeah, so we wanted to give us something that says, okay, turn this check off on the app. Well, I can bring it up on because you guys have done so much. But in terms of technology, we don't call this working group so it was hard to do. So I was just creating my own line item. That's it. Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? We're easy, yeah. Oh my God, you know what?
I'm sure they block.
From where? If you yes.
You can't even check it.
Like 1 minute. So you don't have the password for the ASU because it probably works for that.
No, some people have the itchy.
Right.
But
Access point.
it is.
Oh, I guess you're going to be busy, huh? For a few days. But, so my plan is to get on top Thursday, go Monday, the weekend. But I don't know what I'm going to do. So,
we're thinking about
All right, folks, we're
yeah,
going
I heard it's going to be like, yeah, it's not go from 42 Celsius.
The first talk of this session is the geometric calibration of the Clementine UV Invis camera, and that's going to Spider. All right, so today I'm going to be giving basically a progress report on a PDR project where we're actually going back and looking at all the Clementine UV Viz data. Unfortunately, I know that a couple of people in the crowd probably weren't even alive when Clementine happened. So it launched in 1994. It was in orbit for about 10 weeks. It had an altitude of about 425 kilometers, and there were 6 cameras on board, one of which was the UV Viz camera. To give you a little background on the camera, it included, had 5 narrow bandpass filters ranging from 415 all the way up to 1,000 nanometers. It had a focal length around 90 millimeters, and it had a ground sampling distance of about 115 meters. However, due to the point spread function, the true resolution of the camera was probably somewhere between 200 and 300 meters. So the objective of this project is to take a look at the over almost 600,000 images that were collected during the mission and basically improve the precision of all the map products by determining what the actual interior orientation parameters were for the camera as well as the exterior orientation parameters were. And the way we're doing that is by looking at the optical properties of the camera and basically producing an instrument kernel like we see with today, with more information than was provided originally, because the original camera model didn't include optical distortion or anything like that, but they also didn't have topography for the moon. In addition, camera position and orientation, that information is typically stored in the SPK kernel, the CK kernel, and the frames kernel, and we're also using updated lunar topography. Talk about that in a second. A couple previous attempts to basically create control networks using the UV Viz images. The first one was done in the mid-90s, where they looked at about 45,000 images. And this was called the Clementine Lunar Control Network. And during that process, they created basically this seamless mosaic. However, there wasn't a shape model, and there were some pretty large errors associated in the model. In the mid-2000s, there was a ULC in 2005. This combined the Clementine control network with other control networks that were already generated from Apollo, Maritain, Galileo, as well as some Earth-based observations. During this solution, they also solved for the radius of the moon, and so they came up with a better control network and better product. However, there were still some residual. And once the ULC in 2005 was created, a bunch of the Clementine products were then warped into the all matched up. So since Clementine, we've learned a lot more about the moon. In particular, from the LRO spacecraft, we now have more accurate topography thanks to the GLD-100 and Lola, and there's been other mission sends that have come up with pretty good topographic solutions as well. In addition, we've learned a lot more about the accurate placement of different features on the surface due to the Grail team and Lola team, who have created great ephemeris for the LRO spacecraft, as well as some work that we've done with the LROC team to basically geometrically calibrate using the rotary reflectors. So one of the drivers for this was when you looked at positions of different features on the surface of the moon and compared them between the ULC in 2005
and the LRO reference frame, you'll see that they move 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers is kind of typical that we would see. And so what we were wanting to do was basically rectify that data set, so when you process any UV-Vis image, it'll automatically match up to the current LRO reference frame. What we're doing this is by solving for what the focal length for the UV-Vis camera is, as well as looking at what the optical distortion is, and if there's any band-dependent parameters. So if the focal length changes as a function of wavelength or something like that. In addition, we're also looking at the mounting angles of the camera relative to the spacecraft, as well as the pointing of the camera in each location. So the way we're doing this is finding image pairs, and we're basically matching UV-Vis observations to LRO WAC observations. Created over 90 global mosaics of the moon under different light conditions. And so odds are we have a WAC observation with a very, very similar lighting condition to an observation that was acquired during Clementine. We basically find matching pairs. So on the left-hand side, you have your Clementine image, and have your LROC, a couple of LROC WAC images that match it. Once we find the images, we process the images, we calibrate them, apply a photometric correction, and then we register the images together using fine features, which was talked about in the last. We refine them using point reg, and then we use another ISIS utility called F-plane map, which is going to give us our focal point coordinates. So from F-plane map, we're getting our observed pixel coordinates, our distorted pixels, as well as registered to different features on the surface, which we now have latitude, longitude, and radius, thanks to the WAC images. So with our distorted images, or distorted pixel coordinates, we can adjust the boresight and apply an optical distortion, and that's going to give us an ideal coordinate on the focal plane. We can also come up with that same coordinate by taking the location of the feature on the surface, adjusting the exterior orientation, the focal length of the camera, and we should come up with the same value. So we basically iterate on these parameters until we come up with a camera model where everything starts to align. And so for all the observations acquired with the same band stay the same, and only the orientation of the camera changes per image. So using that technique, which we've also used when we calibrated the wide-angle camera, we've come up with an effective focal length band, as well as a radial distortion coefficient and tangential distortion coefficient bands. And you can see the camera model, or basically the distortion model that we're using in the lower left. It is actually a map of what the distortion looks like. It's exaggerated so you can actually see how the pixels are shifting. But you can see toward the center of the CCD, there's not much of a change, but as you move toward the edge, especially the lower right edge, you're going to see the pixels shift a little bit more. Examples of kind of what those values are right over here. So in addition to just looking at the interior orientation parameters, we're also going to be looking at how can we fix these horizontal offsets between the Clementine products and the WAC products. There's two ways to correct for those. One is we could adjust the spacecraft ephemeris, or the SDK. The second is that we can adjust basically the orientation of the CK. Each one of those techniques will apply a little bit of distortion to the image. So in the case, if you just shift it over, kind of the distortion doesn't change, but it kind of shifts over. But as you can imagine, if you're rotating the image over, you're going to slightly elongate the image in the cross-track direction, or if you're track. But since we're dealing with the UV-Vis camera, the ground sampling distance is pretty coarse, and so that effect isn't that significant. So you're only changing less than 1.001 pixels. So you're not really moving or distorting the pixels that much. And so for this adjustment that we're doing right now, we're only adjusting the orientation of the images to correct for that offset. This was done before when they created ULC in 2005. So this is a comparison of the horizontal offsets that were observed when you, if you looked at what the original SPICE kernels were telling you where the image was, and where the adjusted position was moved to when they created ULC in 2005. So you can see from this map, it's a lot of blues. There's a couple of yellows where you're including images that have pretty large slews and from different time periods. But overall, light blues, dark blues, so that's indicating that most of the adjustments were about 1 to 2 kilometers overall. So when we did our solution, we started with the original, and then we registered each of the images to LRO. What we found was we didn't have to adjust the images that much. So instead of adjusting them several kilometers, we were only adjusting them 300, 400, 500 meters on average. This can be seen in our histogram of comparing our CK adjustments. So in the ULC in 2005, they were typically, most of them were less than 2 kilometers, was centered around 1 kilometer adjustment per image. But when you looked at, it's only a few hundred meters displacement typically. 2 maps created with both the ULC in 2005 kernels as well as our updated kernels. And you can see that the position of different craters and features are all kind of shifting. In this case, they're shifting about 750 meters to the northeast. And this is a blink comparing what our current geometry is to LROC WAC images. So now that we've adjusted the position of each of the images, they now perfectly co-register to LROC WAC observations. But in addition, since LROC is in the LRO reference frame, if you take a diviner map or any other type of map from LRO, you can compare it to the UV-Vis images. So just to give a little status update, so we solved for the interior orientation parameters. For each of the bands, we have a new instrument kernel with radial and decentering distortion. We also built an automated pipeline where you can basically give it a UV-Vis image, they'll find the matching WAC images, go through that processing step, and basically give you the updated pointing information. And so we've done that for about 100,000 images, so there's a few more thousand to go. We're currently in the process of producing CKs with the original kernels. However, we're doing some other work that was actually going to be taking the tracking data as well as the new rail gravity model and going back and redoing the ephemeris from Clementine, and using that, we're going to create a new set of CKs, and that'll give us a little bit better positioning. After that, we're going to be publishing the new kernels as well as the ISIS camera model. And then we're also going to be creating registered multispectral maps, OMAP, all the mineral maps that you're accustomed to in that new reference frame. So you can then take those images and maps and LRO data seamlessly. So I'll take any questions.
All right, so up next is LROC NAC Global Photometry. Here is Boyd.
Thank you. So I'm at Arizona State University with the LROC team. I'm going to be talking about LROC NAC Global Photometry. Okay, so we started out with a photometric model, empirically derived moon photometric function, and this describes the idle breath against phase, emission, and incidence angles. So in this case, it's the log of the idle breath, linear set of linear equation here. To get the model, we did some curve fitting, and we We did this on about 200,000 images that were calibrated and then tiled to 1 by 1 kilometers, and each tile had the photometric calculated from topography using the WAC GLD 100. From there, those tiles were categorized using the LROC Mare shape file and Mare terrain. And then those tiles were binned by photometric angles. Then, so the data fitting was done on phase angles greater than 10 degrees and incidence angles less than 80 degrees. Initial least squares fit was performed for each of the photometric bins. After the initial fit, outliers were excluded within, so we only took the middle 90% of the data. There, the photometric angles bins were recomputed, and a second least squares fit was performed, and that was what was used for the results. So here we have the Highlands model. It's a very simple equation, but we can see that IRF is positively correlated with and negatively correlated with incidence and phase angles. So that means that as emission angle increases, your phase angle increases, your and it prevents overfitting even with a sparse data set. If you were to use this to normalize your data, as with all photometric normalization, what you would do is you would take your divide by for the given phase emission for that location, and then you would multiply by your model at a given reference angle. So in this case, 30 degrees phase, 0 degrees emission, and that would normalize to that given viewing geometry. Wants to normalize. So this is what those NAC tiles look like without any normalization. This is a global from 40 south to 40 north, 0 to 360. And then if we kind of look at this, really see how different each LROC NAC image is. So, if you want to compare IORF against these regions or reflected information, you couldn't really very well unless you have a photometric normalization. Our Highlands model applied to data, you can actually start to see information here instead of just noise. So again, we'll kind of clearly, so you can see the rays now, and you can. There's very little difference between tiles after normalization. So that would be the purpose, to be able to compare the reflectance information between NAC images. And so, model. So these are the residuals, the model fit. So this is after normalization is applied. So we're looking for kind of horizontal values centered around 1. And in this case, we're looking at against phase, emission, and incidence angle. Pretty good result here with these lying pretty flat across here. Up here where we have a phase angle less than 10 degrees, we start getting uptick, and that's because the model does not accurately handle the opposition surge because it's pretty simple. But in the future, we will just a low phase version. Here, the emission angle kind of upticks right around 30 degrees to immature material on steep slopes. So that's not a photometric effect, but an actual property. You get above 80 degrees incidence angle, you get fall off from shadows, and also not accurately describing what's going on. But that's why we have only a range greater than phase of 10 degrees and incidence less than 8 degrees. So how does this look if you were to apply it to a NAC mosaic? So on the left here, we have a LROC NAC uncontrolled mosaic, photometrically normalized. So we see the brightness increase as we go towards 5 degrees phase. And then after normalization here on the right, you see that the image variation greater than 10 degrees phase is very nice, so we don't see any image boundaries. We start to see the way the model is kind of breaking down. That's expected. So we did not just do the fit on the Highlands. So again, here's the Highlands model, and you can see again that it is working pretty well in the Highlands and pretty well in the Mare. So we did a fit to just the Mare region. And so when we did the Mare region, pretty similar, but you have a little bit more tile variation that you can see in the Highlands area. And again, the same region. You can see a few tiles over here. The Mare is still in excellent shape. And that's because that's the region that was used for the fit. So here's the Mare region that was used for the photometric fit. And this is normalized tiles. So we see very little variation in here. This is a little bit better stretch from Mare, so you can actually see what's going on. If we kind of zoom in here. Here's subtle differences and not phase differences between images. So if we look at the Highland model for the same region, this is the Highland model applied to the, you see that it is doing a fair job. More tile variability that you see in the Mare region, but pretty subtle, And so if we compare the Highlands model to the Mare model, what the values are, it's no surprise the Highlands have higher reflectance than the Mare, which we've always known. And then also the Highlands phase curve has a steeper slope than the Mare, which also we knew. And then positive trend of the Mare model against the telling us that the Highlands are more backscattering, means that as we're looking here, we're actually getting about the geology of the region. So the Highlands and the Mare, but you can also divide that up by titanium content. So kind of the takeaway from this, describe the photometric function that will work for the whole moon. And so local and regional mosaics both can benefit from this when the model is applied to the and it's best used for phase angle range greater than 10 degrees and incidence less than 8 degrees, which is that's something like 97% of max taken so far. And then the Highland or Mare models can both be used globally, but if you were to pick one, the Highlands model is a better fit for global region. The Highlands model works better for the Mare, and the Mare model works for the Highlands. Each one would be accurate for the region that it was fit on. And this is just another tool for exploring regional geology, photometric curves, and also it's great if you want to compare the reflectance values from region to region with different and questions?
How are you separating the different terrains? Are you just using a rough outline, or are you using a digital?
So in this case, we use the polygons that are in the PDS, the OROC Monterey shape files.
Okay.
But if you were to use such as the titanium PDF last week, you could use the raster information. We've done that for a little bit of preliminary.
Yeah, this is really neat. Is this tool going to be applied to future releases, or is this going to be something nice?
So there isn't a current plan to get it normalized images into PDFs, but there the ISIS functionality is being developed.
I'll do a follow-up question. So one thing that I was curious about, so you mentioned the opposition phase surge. You guys aren't dealing with those for less than sort of 10 degrees. What are the plans for dealing with that? I know it can be quite challenging in some cases. Question that I have is, do you feel like you need to do it as well?
It, in terms of and making usable data, right now we have a function that covers over 90% of all the data. We plan on doing sort of a piecewise fit, so we'll just fit the lower phase range to try to model the optimism surge more accurately. And so we're going to end up with, again, a piecewise function for the lower phase, and then something else for kind of.
So I just wanted to reiterate, we are live streaming. So if you guys have an issue with that, let us know. Cameras, just let us know. We've heard some concern about that from a couple of people. So we do have a camera in the other room too. We can turn that off.
All right, so our next talk is about NERF image processing and data product generation. That'll be given by Turner.
So since 2012, NERF's been operating in bistatic mode, where we're using the Arecibo Observatory and more recently DSS-13 as our transmitter, because our receiver failed a number of years before that, or our transmitter failed a number of years before that. And I'm going to talk today about how we take the data that we collect and turn it into the output image products that we produce. What I wanted to mention was there's a variety of algorithms for processing SAR data and bistatic SAR data. Most of them exist in the frequency domain. This is largely because they're far more computationally efficient. Those are disadvantages with them. They operate in a coordinate system that requires registration of the SAR data onto the actual file of the images and things pretty significantly. The other thing is that they make assumptions about the nature of the geometry and how the signals that are being received are collected with non-traditional side-looking SAR image geometries. Other methods that are less utilized, that are the time-domain ones, primarily not utilized as often, is that they're very computational to the frequency domain ones, but they allow you to process directly onto a grid on the surface, which mitigates the first disadvantage, and they allow you to deal with some of the more unusual imaging geometries that the NERF finds itself getting into with the measurements we're making. Our processing system works in the time domain. So during the bistatic collection, NERF's receiver is just open. We just start collecting samples. So there's a variety of signals that we collect. Some of them are the ones we want, some of them are the ones that we don't want. Is that we receive receiver noise. It's just basically there. We don't have any information coming into the receiver. The ground station transmits a linear frequency modulated pulse. So that little graph in the lower left corner is a plot of frequency versus time. A linear ramp in frequency around some center frequency, often, which is our pulse repetition interval. That signal would then be passed through the back of the spacecraft onto the back lobes of our antenna, and we see that in our data, and we use it as a phase and timing reference, and I'll get into that a little bit. Then there's the backscattered signal, so we point our antenna on the surface at the target of interest.
ground station is tracking or pointing as well. And we collect the reflected signal that we want. This is the science data that we want to process. But because our receiver's open, and because of the geometries we find ourselves into, we often see the speculative reflection, and I'll inadvertently refer to that as the forward scatter, because it's sort of the radar term, will just come out of my mouth. But that's kind of an unwanted signal that kind of gets in the way. It's generally stronger than backscatter, and it can trash our data. Our planning tools are designed to try to separate them. Under some geometry, we just can't. We're having to make compromises in the plan. The image on the left is what our raw data looks like. Intrinsic time scales in our data. One is what I'll call the fast time or sample time, and that is the minigraph receiver is collecting data and down converting it into a 2 megahertz window, give or take a little bit, around the center frequency that we're operating in. Row in that rectangular image would be 1 pulse's worth of data chopped out of the time series. We have lots of pulses, that's the slow time scale. Each time we transmit a chirp from the ground station, there's a corresponding time window where that happens. And so that sets this thing up on the left, which doesn't really look terribly interesting. The structure that you're seeing there, that's sort of the diagonal lines, that's because the clock on minigraph and the clock on the ground station are not at all the same. What we do is we take the data that's on the left and we cross-correlate it with the chirp that we're transmitting. So we have a mathematical model of the chirp that was transmitted, the actual signal that we emitted. We take a time series of that and take its complex conjugate and multiply it by the actual data that we collect. And when you sum all that up, you get an image that looks like the one on the right, which is an image of the surface. But if you look, you can see something that looks like a Kepler crater there. That's kind of a depression on the right side. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is what I highlighted in blue. That sharp bright line is the direct path. Of the antenna, and there really isn't anything in the way other than the spacecraft. So in the cross correlation, it turns into something very much like a delta function. So we're going to be using that as a time and phase reference. So it's an important signal, though it's not our science data. Highlighted in orange is the actual backscatter from the surface that we're interested in processing. The area in red here is the speculative reflection that we're hoping to ignore or avoid. As you can see, it overlaps the direct path in the beginning, but generally speaking, the direct path is the most dominant signal in the data, so that's not usually a problem. So once we've identified where the direct path is in the data, the next step is we need to use it as a time reference. So we go through and we identify where all the samples are that we think in each of the pulses that we're able to identify. As it's moving in and out of backlobes in the antenna, it drops in and out, so it gets a little tricky. We fit a polynomial to a lower polynomial to that data in the sample space. Done that, we can then basically go in and isolate each of the direct path measurements that we have and extract the reference phase. And this would be the phase that would be hitting the back of the antenna. So we have at this time, this was the phase, the reference phase of the signal that we're going to process against. Once we've done that, we use the splice kernels and derived geometry data to basically go through and geometrically isolate the backscatter data. So we have our antenna pattern, we lay it down on the surface, we know at each time we receive the direct path pulse, this is where the antenna pattern was. And we work out what the lead from the across the extent of the pattern, turn that into a time offset, and then convert it back into sample space. And that tells us precisely where the backscatter signal should be in the data. Once we have that, the next step is to take the backscatter data that we've collected, and we're going to basically adjust the phase. So we're taking the phase that was received that we're using as a reference of the direct path at the back of the spacecraft. And we're saying, okay, to the center of the pattern and back, that was traveled compared to the direct path, we adjust the phase relative to that. We used to do it, it's pretty straightforward. There's the reference phase that we started with that we measured at the direct path at the back of the antenna. Are the positions of the ground point at the center of the beam, the transmitter and the receiver in a lunar fixed coordinate system at the time the direct path measurement was received. And that those vector addition over there basically converts to the range difference we're looking for. And then we have to multiply that by the chirp center frequency and divide it by the speed of light, hit it with 2 pi, and that gets us the phase offset we're looking for. So now at this point, we have the data sort of reference phase relative to where the ground bounds at the center of the beam would be. Referred to as azimuth compression. What we're going to be doing is any given point in the receiver. So if you imagine this sort of parallelogram that I've drawn here that looks like a surface. There's a cyan point there that I've labeled as I and J. That would be a point in our output grid. And now we're trying to determine the assignment to this point. And so as you can see, as the spacecraft moves, each, as we're pulsing the radar, lots of pulses cover a point on the surface and near the middle of the pattern. It migrates both in range and in azimuth. If you look, you can see the range contours are moving and the point where it's at is in a different location. Over here on the right is the value, is a coherent averaging of all of that data. And when I say by coherent averaging, what we're doing is adjusting it for the phase shift. On each of the terms in this equation. First is that the little gamma m there is the actual sample value that we measured for this pulse at that time. And what we're doing then is multiplying it by e to the I delta theta, where delta theta is, again, we're using the spice kernels to calculate an offset in phase to where this location would be in the current pulse process. Weighted with where it is in the antenna pattern because we want to weight stuff in the middle of the pattern more heavily than we do with stuff at the edges of the pattern. And then lastly, we're summing this over all of the pulses that point is in the 3dB antenna pattern or 6dB, depending on how we're doing our processing. There's gain normalization, which has to deal with FFT, the FFT processing that we're using, and the sum of the antenna patterns. There's a way you have to normalize that so you don't see the antenna pattern in your output data. All this, we get an image that looks like something at the top. So we have two channels. The processing we're doing would be referred to as single look because we're treating the entire collect as one single aperture. The first step in the process after we have these images, we have one for H and one for B, they're complex images, is we start driving some geometric metadata because we need to calibrate the data. So the first thing that we're going to do is, the pixels, as I showed you, pass through the beam, so there's a time window where each pixel is exposed to the beam. In the grid, which the time pattern, that's the top image that you see there. We calculate incidence, emission, phase, range, and all the other various things we want at that time. And we're going to calculate, we have latitude, longitude, backlinks because we set up the grid that we're processing onto. So that all kind of gets smacked together into some products that we deliver as DVRs to PDS. The next step in the process then is to calibrate the data. We have a temperature-dependent variation in gain and phase imbalance in our collected data between the two channels. So we need to know a time in order to look up into our temperature measurements to apply. The two equations at the top of the page show how we do the calibration. Basically, we're distributing the phase and the gain imbalance over the two channels uniformly because we're not sure what ground truth is. We know what they are relative to each other. Once we've done that, then we generate the sort of four standard Stokes vectors. The top one is probably the most understandable, which is power, just the sort of reflected power back from the surface. And then there's S2, S3, and S4, which have various uses depending on what you're trying to do with the data. And then our science team in particular is interested in the circular polarization ratio, which gives you some measure of surface roughness, and this can be used to determine whether there's water ice, things like that on the surface. So that's sort of how we do our processing. Where we're at right now, our processor consists of components that are built in MATLAB, C using OpenMP, that's where the coherent backscattering happens, and we have parts of it that are written in Java. We're in the process of trying to replace the MATLAB and the C code with Java. There's several reasons we're doing this. That the Java has a lot more, I should say, a richer concurrency environment that we'll be able to exploit that will greatly simplify some of the OpenMP code that we have. Is that we're going to be able to use Spice. Our planning system has a Spice that runs in native Java that's thread safe here in the processing part more easily. The current software that we have was developed by Sandia National Laboratories, and they take CSVs that we generated for them and sort of slap stuff together that way, but we'll be able to actually use Spice in our new processor that we're building. The software that we have, the MATLAB code is interactive, so when you're running it, it's popping up plots and asking you, is this okay, that kind of stuff, and which is great. I mean, it's wonderful when you're running it, but the software, because we're doing this time-domain back projection, it takes forever. It's hours to process our data. So we have computing clusters that we can process our data onto that code and get rid of the MATLAB stuff. We can just distribute it over these systems and be done in far less time. There are some other experts in my group that do a lot of GPU computing, so we're exploring offloading the coherent backscatter averaging process because that should speed things up substantially, drop our processing time down from hours to minutes if it's successful. And we're also hoping to integrate the processing software changes that we're making so that we can have a more informed planning process about what data we've collected, over what ranges, where we've collected information, that kind of stuff, to sort of give us a little bit more planning cycle about what we've already collected. in the industry, we were doing like one collect every month, so we had, 5, 10 collects, but now we're doing 3 or 4 a month, and we're starting to pile up, data's starting to pile up, and we need more information. Questions?
Right. So I want to kind of harken back to what Ross was talking about. This was after listening to all the talks this morning and understanding how complicated all this data is. We release these as things that we can just map on and we can use because this is.
No, the point of this was not for me to say, hey, this is how you have to use our data. I mean, we wanted to show you sort of the processing is. It's nothing like nothing like the imaging system. If you have optical instruments, we're having to do all the signal processing stuff to be able to cook it down to the actual products we're working with. Process.
So the question is, and I might have missed it, are you going to plan to release map projected data products?
We have, so at the moment, right now, we're doing everything on a lunar sphere. We're hoping to change that at some point. But we produce lat-long backplanes for every pixel in all of our output images that map 1-to-1, so they are from the data, but because of the fact we're not processing onto a DEM, there may be registration errors. So that's something that we're hoping to tackle in the future.
Okay.
Questions?
So we're just a couple minutes ahead. If people can you press on, you okay with that over there? All right. So the next talk is LRO Diviner Lunar Radiometer Global Data Products. And the presenter is Will.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Diviner, and our main goal is to actually address trends comment we just made, which is level 1 data, which is pretty daunting to steep learning curve. This is something we can just point to GIS. So we are actively trying to address that concern. And so I'm going to talk about some of what we call our level 1, some of the higher level data products. Make the data much more approachable and usable by the community. Just a brief overview of the instrument for those of you not familiar. Measure solar reflectance mid-infrared radiance. So spectral channels, we have 2 visible, so broadband visible, and then we have 3 channels that are selected ones that are specifically used to do mineralogy. So we're looking at a spectral feature that is indicative of bulk silicate mineralogy, and then we have 4 longer wavelength channels that we use to characterize the thermal environment of the magnet. And we've been operating continuously since July of 2009, or nearly continuously, and we're now in the middle of our cornerstone mission, which is our and so one of the things we can do, here's a view of the instrument. We can nominally operate nadir, operating push broom, just go along with spacecraft, but we do targeted observations. So we're doing a lot of off-nadir observations, and as part of the cornerstone mission, other sort of special data products that may be coming out in the future, but mostly what I'm going to be focusing on are going to be the nadir observations, which will be the most useful. So I'll talk about the different that are available on PDS. We've updated a few of the existing products recently, and we have a brand new product that just came online about a month ago on PDS, which I'll talk about. And I already mentioned this. The whole goal here is to make this data set much more approachable. And then at the end of that time, I'll talk about some new data products we have in the pipeline soon. So I already mentioned our level one. These are, on PDS, these would be labeled as RDRs. These are reduced data records. So our basic measurements as we go along, we have 21 detectors in each channel. And so each detector is taking a measurement every 0.128 seconds and just continuously taking measurements. We have 9 channels, 21 detectors. So it's sort of this fire hose of data that just keeps coming at us every 3 months. So we're constantly updating that PDS. So each one of those measurements generates an RDR record. So we've got a radiance measurement and the corresponding volumetric temperature, and then any other corresponding need to use that geometry, not too much to. And then those are split into 10-minute sequences. So if you go to PDS, you can download 10-minute chunks. It's ASCII tables, so they're pretty easy to adjust, but there's a lot of it. So it's a lot of data to work through. This is an example of some of that level one data mapped onto a sphere. 2 months, about 2 months into the data mission, after we just split that data to day and night, we just mapped onto a sphere. So you can sort of see the individual ground tracks here. These little gaps you'll see in a lot of our data products. These are where we're doing, maybe a space look or looking at a calibration target. We have these raw and almost off the surface. How the temperatures vary with latitude. And up here you can start to see where you get permanently shadowed areas that get very cold, to 20 Kelvin or colder places. And then typically we're getting close to 400 Kelvin equator. Okay, so we have these gridded data records. These are an attempt to take all this level one data and create some maps that you can just adjust very easily to a GIS. So our basic product is a level 2. These are products that have no modeling involved. They're just data. And what we've done is we've tried to bin them into maps that are at consistent resolutions and projections as Lola data, so you can easily. We are currently almost done with our processing everything up to our extended science mission 2, which would take us up to 16. So that's almost done. Special thanks to Ray, who's been really helping us out with that. About 2 map cycles done, so that those should be online. And then, so what these level 2 products are, basically the subspacecraft longitude cycles between negative 180 and 187 days. So we're generating a map 7 days, one on the day side, one on the night side, and descending node of the orbit. And those local times drift about 2 hours. So in a year we get between 0 and 24 hours per year. Night observations alternating on the hemisphere. Sort of a cartoon of that, so we get the nighttime, the daytime. So what I've done is to kind of show this. I've strung together a bunch of these maps. So these are our cylindrical projected maps turned on, and the spacecraft orbits drift to the west. 180 degrees, we call that a new map cycle. The drift in local time going from the afternoon to noon, from the morning, and then eventually we cross the terminator, and that node of the orbit kicks over to the night side, and the night side orbit. And so we do have corresponding local time maps that go along with these. So you can pull these out, you can pull up the local time map and see what was the local time on the surface for each map pixel. Because there is seasonality, especially at high latitudes. Julian date and the local times for each of these map pixels. And we go up to 128 pixels per meter highest resolution. Here's another example. So we do cylindrical and polar map projections. I won't go into too much detail on the processing, but one of the main processing steps we do, which makes it somewhat labor intensive, to do all this. And we have to split each of those map cycles into 144 tiles. So it takes a lot of computation, but one of the things we do is we ray trace onto a DEM. Level ones are just reference to a sphere, so we actually trace onto the DEM. We do a geometric correction. We also model the effective field of view. Monte Carlo simulation of the effective footprint on the surface. Helps clean up the data quite a bit. And so one of the things that it does is it helps us ensure that all the within that field of view actually get populated with the radiance value, which is sort of an issue with high latitudes and cylindrical projection where the bins get really narrow, you get an aliasing, and so this footprint is properly represented on the surface. Actually better aligns our channels. Our channels are not all four-sided to the same spot, so different channels are in slightly different locations on the surface at a given time. So channels just cleans them up quite nicely and aligns them. That we're hoping to get past for all these data products. Go to level 3. Level 3s are also gridded products, but they involve some form of model. Basically, 3 different flame volumetric brightness temperature, which is different IR channels. And these mirror the level 2 brightness temperature maps. We do get anisothermality in our channels, so if there's a mixture of view, different channels will give you a different brightness temperature. So the volumetric temperature is comparing temperatures to, say, a thermal model. And then Christensen feature, this is where we use our 3 channels around 8 microns. This gives us topology. This is work done by Ben Greenhagen's been these data products. And then Josh Banfield has generated these rock abundance and regular temperature maps. Again, these are cumulative maps that are fairly easy to ingest into the GIS so we get the maps out of them. So here's an example of the CF map. Our CF map on PDS, and once we complete our next batch of level 2s, we'll update it again in the near future. And then for the rock abundance, I'll just, where that comes from, we use this anisothermality to understand rock abundance. So basically, if you have a mixture of temperatures, in this case, temperature and some rocks, thermal inertia, they respond differently to changes in illumination. Warmer and along very rapidly once the sun sets. Temperatures will give you different temperatures in the nonlinear nature of the Planck function. Wavelengths, wavelength channels will be more strongly influenced by the warm temperatures in the field of view. Exploit that to get at rocks are in the field of view. So this is a couple of model curves. We can, what Josh does is he uses 6 to 8 and fits the data with a model that is a mixture of rocks and regolith, a fraction of rock coverage and a regular temperature. Those maps. So here's an example of which generally is going to highlight things like impact craters. We have lots of blocks and material. Okay, and then this is the last product I'll talk about. This is our new product that just came out. It's a cumulative product that takes all the data from the first 5.5, compiles it into half-degree grids. It's also been in quarter-hour hours of local time. So this effectively gives a diurnal temperature curve for every map pixel. And so this makes it really easy to kind of slice and dice the data and make maps. So for each map pixel you have a curve, and so here's an example where I took that data set and created an instantaneous temperature map of the moon. You can very easily make other maps if you need to make a figure from this data set for here. So here, for example, I just took channel 6, channel 8, took those two channels, took the average nighttime temperatures and difference them, and this highlights the anisothermality that I was mentioning. So where the anisothermality is high, you have greater mixtures of temperatures, so those are rocky areas. Differences in thermal physical properties in the red. So again, you can see Oriental, Mare, all these different thermal physical properties really show up, including halos, we have absence of blocks. All right, I'm going to skip a few of these because I'm out of time. This is more for just reference for these are all different papers that kind of go into greater depth into all these data products. The process of creating lunar polar maps that we've had a lot of requests for. So we'll be working on that this summer. This is just an example of min-max average, which is at 240 meters per pixel. Yeah, so I'm out of time, so
We probably have time for one question.
Just coming up. So it's just a kind of more of a technical thought. How differently, how do you guys do it? What's your favorite way to roll aspect?
yeah, I think local time is kind of how we deal with it, which is so why we also been in local time the new data product. Our local time data density is getting high enough now that we can add thermal physical properties all over the moon without having to do a lot of averaging. And so that's really kind of opening up a lot of new science to us. And that's actually another new product that's coming out is Paul Haynes is working on kind of global map, plus or minus 7 degrees latitude of using soil temperature maps.
So, this talk is entitled Prism Multispectral and Hyperspectral Mapping Data, Observing Modes.
Great, thank you. My name is Frank Stelos. I'm at the Applied Physics Lab in Laurel, Maryland. Prism mapping data. And I realized about 5 seconds ago that I'm the first person talking about Prism today. So Prism is the compact reconnaissance imaging spectrometer for Mars that's on board MRO, which has been in operation since the fall of 2006. It's a hyperspectral imaging spectrometer that goes from about 0.4 to has two primary modes of operation. One we call targeted observation, which involves using image motion compensation to get down to about 20 meters per pixel. The other way we operate the instrument is in a mapping mode, and that's what we're going to talk about today, which does not use image motion compensation, but is strictly a push broom scan of the surface. As I mentioned, Prism has been at it for a long time. So this is here's the first mistake. The aspect is wrong. That's okay. We'll just go with it. I've been doing this for a while. On the very left-hand side is still the Bush administration. Right? all the way across. It doesn't even include 16 and 17. PRISM investigation is also chock full of TLAs. So you see lots of three-letter acronyms. The ones that you can hardly read on the side here are different mapping modes that we've used over the course of the mission. And the bar graphs here show when they were in effect. So very briefly, our mapping data comes at kind of two spatial resolutions in round numbers, about 100 meters per pixel or about 200 meters per pixel. The mode was suspended fairly early in the mission due to a technical consideration I won't get into. Multispectral survey, or MSP, is the one mapping mode that's been consistent all the way across the entire mission. And then as we got into the extended science phase, ESP, in 2008, 2009, and extended mission 1, we started to get a little more creative with the way we could operate the instrument and invented and constructed some additional observing modes to give us a little more capability. Linear mode, hyperspectral survey, and multispectral linear all kind of came on in sequence. I mentioned the two modes. So if you're familiar with any PRISM targeted observation, I should mention to this point, the bulk of the publications, the bulk of the science, the bulk of the research that's been done with PRISM data has come from the targeted observing mode. If you're familiar with the little bow ties, the funny little footprint, that's not this. These are long push broom scan noodles. The way to look at these or think about these is that the cross-track, spatially that is, the cross-track field of view of the instrument never changes. So if you can imagine one of those symmetric little PRISM bow ties, essentially a circumscribed rectangle where the cross-track field of view is the same. So this on the left is one of our 100 meter per pixel multispectral window observations, and on the right is a more typical multispectral survey. Just refer to these as noodles. And all those mapping modes kind of come in three durations: 15, 45, or 180 seconds. Morello buzzes along at effectively about 3 kilometers per second, which gives us a long track coverage per segment of roughly 45, 180, or 540. This is a look spectrally at the different observer modes that I've mentioned. The bottom graph is PRISM. It's the full hyperspectral sampling of the instrument, again, not what we're talking about here. 435 channels in the median, 107, sorry, in the one portion, 107 in the shorter wavelength portion. And most of the mapping modes have a reduced spectral sampling in some way, shape, or form. And is actually the spectral sampling of the multispectral window and multispectral survey modes, whereas in the middle, some of those other modes that we added to beef up the spectral sampling of some of our mapping data. And you're on the equivalent of hyperspectral linear mode. The eye chart table. There's the different modes, the different number of observations, number of individual segments. The bottom line number is this one. 76,000 plus PRISM mapping observations in PDS currently. Technically, that is just a gob of mapping data. Right? That's the efficient term. A few minutes ago, readily accessible to community. That's one of the things in PRISM SOC that we're trying to remedy. And so the remainder of this talk is bringing up to speed on some of the things we're attempting to do with the data to make it more accessible to the community. A couple history plots here in terms of how the acquisition went. So this is somebody get rid of the zonal averages. This is latitude bins versus time. Again, this goes over the course of the entire mission. Number of observations acquired at each one of those bins. I should point out that this color ramp is on a log scale, and so you can kind of, once you kind of adjust to that, you can kind of get a sense of some of the history of the entire PRISM operation specifically. All the way on the left, when we started way back in 2006, there were mapping exclusion zones kind of baked into the way MRO operated, and so we were able to acquire a tremendous amount of mapping data relatively quickly. We went away after a little while, and in part to favor more PRISM and high-rise stereo and PRISM target observations, so our accumulation rate dropped off. Where later in the mission, we've gone to about a 25% duty cycle on the IR portion of the instrument, so that's why you get kind of a big sense effect from the right-hand side. That's the multispectral survey mode acquisition history map. The hyperspectral survey mode, which I alluded to, again, this is consistent with the MSP spatially, with many, many more spectral channels. mention this one specifically. This is the MSV mode. This is the last mapping mode we put in place. See, we started about the middle of the mission, but it's really been going back gangbusters since that point in time. The accumulated coverage in this particular mode is really fantastic at this point. And that's a 100 meter per pixel, very nearly prism being here. It's the 0.4 to 1 micron wavelength range. We're getting to the point where we almost have enough of this data to consider turning this, making a global map of just this node. One of the standard PDS products that CRISM is committed to producing is referred to as the multispectral reduced data record, this MRDR, map tile data set. So this is those 200 meter per pixel, 72 or so channel global maps. So we've taken the planet, cut it into roughly 2,000 individual tiles, and we're trying to sew all of the different strips together. The accumulation map for the two nodes that feed into that product, the multispectral survey and the hyperspectral survey. This has not been filtered for quality or for observation circumstances at all. And so just accepting every possible observation into the queue. Bottom line point is that at the equator, and again, I'm sorry, I know it's a very near the polar orbit. Of course, there's more terrain at the equator for any other small circle line latitude. 80% or so coverage at the equator with those combined modes. Importantly, is labeled connectivity. This should really be referred to as coverage density. That's the average number in the spot as a function of latitude. Of course, the poles are just, coverage is incredible. Tapering off dramatically at the equator. These two data sets, though, start to subtract out some things that we can't put into that MRDR data set for various reasons. These have now been down selected based on incidence angle, so everything that's got a lower incidence angle than 75 degrees, and instrument operational characteristic. We've got the detector has to run at a relatively close to this. Gotten interesting to work with over the years. Density drops off dramatically. Change in scale here, but you see that this connectivity here, coverage density map, fraction of the planet in terms of latitude, where our average coverage is still for two strips. What that looks like spatially, possibly, like that. Good. So these are a couple of those tiles I referred to, tile 1249 and 1250, split down the middle, for a planet that's getting a lot of interest lately. This is Jezero crater right here. And there's another candidate line that would be Sirius right there. So for an area of the planet which has also received a lot of attention in terms of PRISM targeted observations, this kind of lays out the spatial pattern of accumulated mapping coverage. And so two observations. Not bad, right? But also not complete. And there's, if you kind of look, transverse across there's lots of gaps, which kind of separates into individual little piles of observations that are mutually overlapping. And that becomes a really important point for the wrangling all the data together into consistent radiometric framework. This at the end either. This is our existing kind of workflow for producing those MRDR tiles that I alluded to before. More complicated over the years as we've realized we had to put more into it to get the quality product out the other end that we're interested in producing. Focus on for the next few slides is this radiometric reconciliation. Turns out, we think, is kind of the key step that's going to allow us to finally produce these things and get them delivered to the PDS format that support a wider use by the community. This is not mapping data. This is a pile of target observation. They happen to be also from Jezero crater. It's kind of not important where they're from. Process to something called MTRDRs. If you want to hear more about MTRDRs, please come to the PRISM workshop later today. For no other reason to get this very cool limited edition thumb drive. Actually, it has all the information on it you need to crack it into the PRISM target observation data set. So, come by the workshop. Anyway, the data have been processed in such a way that the set on the left radiometrically is consistent with the acquisition circumstances of pile mapping strips. And through an empirical optimization process, we're able to knock all those into a consistent radiometric framework. What we want to do with the mapping data. But the catch is that all those have a tremendous amount of mutual overlap. So there's lots of redundant information there. It's a well-connected network of observations. We can take that same map, that same empirical optimization, apply it to a well-connected set of mapping strips. Mapping strips, this is one wavelength, 770 nanometers. They've been corrected for the incidence angle, but nothing else. And through that same process that we apply to the targeted observations, we can get this mosaic out the other end. This hasn't gone through any post-processing to kind of really remove the strips that are hopeless, like the big bright one up there that's just incredibly dusty. Or to optimize the stacking order, or to average through. But the point is that this is possible. But the catch is, if you look at the count map up there, this is where we have a single mapping strip, as you would have expected from all those coverage maps and connectivity maps. This was an illuminating example, though, because this one off the strip that I mentioned, everything to the product scientifically, mathematically, it's kind of holding things together. That is, it's bolting the left-hand side and the right-hand side of this region together structurally. So we went through an exercise last summer where we asked the question, can we do that, mathematically within our optimization regime without relying on really high opacity strips to kind of hold the whole system together for us? The answer is we could. A summer student I had last year was looking specifically at that, was able to set up an optimization that would allow us to kind of jump the gaps in data. This wasn't meant to be a final product either. The key point from this slide is that they're not actually connected, or they're loosely connected, and we're still able to get the radiometry kind of line up through the process you put together. So the applications of the mapping mosaics that we expect to flow off the end of this. This is an example from a White Kim's talk later today over in the mappers meeting. This is a different number of data sets. The key point here I want to make is that for the mapping data, 200 meters per pixel or 100 meters per pixel themes. And so there's this natural handshaking between the thermophysics from the themes investigation and the prism mapping data in terms of spatial resolution. I won't read all these slides to you, all these words to you. The LRDRs that I mentioned involves a rate of transfer correction, and so in that context, the empirical optimization is essentially a polishing step. But I also showed you an example where we're looking at the top of the atmosphere, and so in that case, the application of the same is acting as a relative atmospheric and to some extent photometric correction to radiometrically reconcile observations at the top of the atmosphere. Some of the products that we're going to be rolling off the stock relatively soon are the LRDRs. Those 100 meter per pixel full linear hyperspectral map tiles, mosaics, and some of the other mapping ones. Thank you.
For one question.
I can ask. So, if I understand it correctly, there is now a product where I could look up how much activity is in the atmosphere and basically, for example, correct?
Right. So, I can say the record of atmospheric state, the climatology table derived from prism observations, mostly the gimbal observations as opposed to the mapping data. The prism gimbal got arthritis a number of years ago, and so our ability to kind of track the atmospheric state ourselves kind of tapered off. Specifically has been wrangling that information, and the table is available.
All right, so the last talk of the morning is the prism analysis toolkit. So just to remind you guys, I see Lisa back there, so we confirm the room will be locked during lunch. So you can leave your stuff here if you're comfortable with that. And again, use the maps in your handouts or whatever to take a look at some of the restaurant options nearby.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. All right, so
who you just heard from, Scott Marshall, also involved in this work. I'm going to tell you about the CAT, which is the Critical Analysis Toolkit. I'll give you a sort of rundown, a summary of what CAT does, about some recent updates to the software. See, I also just told you what PRISM is. I don't need to spend too much time on this slide. Just have our schedule. We're looking at reflected sunlight from Mars. Mars comes earlier since 2006. So the PRISM Analysis Toolkit is a collection of software tools, loading up, displaying, looking at PRISM data, processing PRISM data. It's programmed in IDL and NV, started by Shannon Pelkey back at Brown University several years ago. We picked it up at APL, contributions from many different people. Universities, making some contributions now as well. Runs under NV. The current release runs in classic mode only. Robinson group at Washington University made some updates that allow it to run natively under NV 5.4. So PRISM is currently releasing products called NTRDRs, or versions of the targeted mode data. They include a lot of noise filtering, photometric corrections, atmospheric correction, map projection, summary parameter browse images, and that's a lot of the stuff you can do in CAT. Useful. Those data, because NTRDRs are not available for all PRISM data, or mapping mode data, and mode data in recent years for the gimbal range has been restricted. So it's also useful for NTRDR data, some spectral processing. And it also allows you to go back to the original unfiltered PRISM data to apply your own corrections and make sure that things that you may be seeing are filtered in the GRDR processing. So the other updates are summary. Well, the first update is in summary parameters. PRISM spectrum, you're looking at 100 numbers in spectral data that you're really not that interested in necessarily. The summary parameter basically distills that down into a single number that something that you're actually interested in. Like for PRISM, you might be looking at a band depth or something like that that indicates the presence or absence of a mineral or class of minerals. A couple of years ago, Christina and Viviana Beck published a paper which developed a low new PRISM, and they are more the new formulations are more robust against noise and discriminate better. Those summary parameter calculations are now in CAT. Another update to CAT is involving map projection. The map projection now conforms to the MRO standard, where it also matches the projection in the NTRDR data that's being released now, whereas the old CAT projection engine used a different pixel scale, yes, and different latitude true scale. In order to get that map protection to work, when you install CAT, you have to copy a set of files that define the custom spheres, data, and reference systems into a particular directory in the installation. And there's instructions and IDL code that help with that. And another little minor tweak to the map protection thing in Indy. There's prism observations. When you do the map projection, you'll get this series of disconnecting frames. That comes from when the detector is still recording frames after the gimbal stops moving. So as a result, when we're doing a targeted observation, the gimbal is slewing to keep the field of view moving slower on the planet than the spacecraft is actually flying by. And then when the gimbal stops, suddenly you get these things that are really in Indy, you get a series of discrete lines, and what it really is really long rectangular pixels that don't. And CAT now, by default, will map project your data and skip those extended frames. But you can select if you want to keep those for some reason, you can check the box and don't keep them. So that's all I have on this. We have a workshop at this afternoon, 3:15 next door. Everybody can come by.
Any questions? All right, and I think with that, we'll break for lunch. Sessions start again at 1:30 here in this room. So, Lisa, do you have any announcements or?
Really, except that